I have a lot of regrets about the amount of drugs that I did over years. It changed my emotional balance and my ability to control that. I have a lot of conversations with my wife with highs and lows that were not there before. And I haven't been on any amount of anything outside TRT for a couple of years now, but the damage is done. You don't see it in the moment. You see it years later when you stop.
Yeah.
Right? Men are taught to not talk about that stuff.
There's a lot of variables that play into insulin sensitivity when GH is being used. Outside of lipolysis, there could be changes to internal metabolic health from fluid retention causing.
What you could also do is take Retatrutide for appetite suppression and fat liberation through GIP and glucagon receptor agonism, and then take intranasal Xenatide as needed when you feel like cheating on your diet. You block the GIP receptors in the brain and some peripheral tissue, and the appetite is gone for the next 6 hours. BDNF increases can also cause hair loss.
Is that why all the smartest people are bald?
Yeah, Steve. Allegedly.
The physio was able to, there was a physio guy, it's not focusing, but you can see all the bruising behind my nail.
Just do bodybuilding, man.
Yeah, just go back.
Just do bodybuilding. What are you doing?
Bodybuilding, brother.
Yeah. Not that I'm fucking crippled too, you know. I tore my quad.
Not that what you compete in is absolutely totally badass.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was fun, but it was, it's like when you, if anything, coming second in bodybuilding, it doesn't hurt as much as coming second in kickboxing.
Because you got knocked out probably, or is it by points? What
points? Points. I was winning the first round 14-12, and then it ended up 28-25. Just some silly mistakes in the last 15 seconds.
So you had 1 point, 2 point, second place?
Yeah. It's and from when I was younger, like I said on Instagram.
You know what you need to do now? You go on Fuad Abiad's podcast, you lose your mind.
That's
I got a bone to pick with you, Fuad.
Too soon, Steve.
But we're already recording. That's why I like it. You just start. And then you just start. Yeah, did we started? Yes, we started. So whatever you say, like everything you say before the intro is free game. But I know we're already recording. So.
Yeah, this is the part that I clip out for the reels too.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need the followers, man. I got that.
How you guys been so far? How you guys been doing?
Good.
Yeah, it must have been maybe the start of July when I came back from holidays was the last time we all were together as the Three Musketeers. So
yeah, Kurt got busy and then Dean got busy and I've been patiently waiting. But we'll record again tomorrow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you guys coordinating and all coming on at the same time. All from
pleasure, bro.
Different parts of the world.
Yeah,
it feels so diverse right now.
It's 7 o'clock in the morning there in Vegas?
Yeah, it's 7 a.m. Earliest I've ever been awake in my entire lifetime.
No, you've been awake at that time, but you were awake the whole night.
Oh, true. Sorry.
Yeah. You go to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. I've been there.
You know me so well, Steve.
Yeah. I see you've been partying a lot with Jared.
Jared has been partying a lot.
Jared is having his midlife crisis. It's like he's reinventing himself. You know, I thought I was bad with my motorbikes, but he's going ham.
I've been keeping him company, you know, a little kind of like your TripAdvisor.
Oh yeah. Everybody needs a TripAdvisor. Mm-hmm. I'll be there in September for the Mr. Olympia. So
awesome! I'll be here too. Yeah, we should all definitely link up. That'd be awesome.
You know, give me a call.
We'll do. Yeah.
Gert, what's new?
I'm happy.
Nothing, brother.
Nothing. Just busy.
No. Yeah, man. Summer's tough when your kids get to a certain age. Man, summer's busier than the school year.
All right.
Yeah.
That's why I got the 2 hours the most I could spare. Like I was so many moving parts right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had
the amount of scheduling. Dean probably knows, like back and forth between me and my wife just to figure out how everything can work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had the whole neighborhood out our back garden just there that my wife politely told them, Callum and Charlie's daddy has an important call, so can you please all go out onto the street and play?
I'm not there yet. My daughter's 1 year old and 2 months, so she's running around and screaming. That's the most I get to deal with.
Enjoy it.
I will. So what's on the menu today now?
I was thinking about a fun topic first, actually. This is just pure curiosity off the top of my mind. But how much did you guys know before you ever took your first injection? Each of you.
I knew a lot. Well, I thought I knew a lot. But you learn on the job, man. It's like driving. Right? I mean, how much did you know about cars when you got your license? And then you learn on the road. So, but I was researching for years. I think I was researching since maybe 20 years old. And then I took my first injection at 26. And of course, now there's so much more information, and we kind of raised the bar amongst all the educators. So now instead of having like this leaflet with like 4 pages that you need to know, now there's like an encyclopedia of shit you need to know before you're allowed to take your first injection. But I think if you know the leaflet, I think you're good to go. You'll learn the rest as you go along.
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff in that big old book, it just causes paranoia.
That was bullshit, you know? A lot of bullshit in there too. So yeah, I thought I knew a lot, but I know a lot more now. But again, we didn't really have good education. We had the forums and everybody was anonymous. And there's a lot of bro science. And a lot of that ended up to be true. But like if you go to the old steroid logs on the forums, I mean, when you look at it now, it's kind of bad.
Yeah, I think for me, 19, 20 was when I became less naive to what was sort of going on in bodybuilding. And at that point, I was in my undergraduate degree for pharmacology. And then I think like actively just reading and researching up until the age, I think, of 23. And that was after competing naturally and all that sort of stuff. And to me, even at like 38 back to like 22, 23, 15 years, I'm still learning. Like there's still stuff that we can expand our knowledge on that back then, you know, a lot of the theories that I put out there over the years or talking about like running TRT and then a cycle rather than blasting and cruising. A lot of that sort of just came from my own understanding of like, why would I want to, like, if I'm not going to be like a top level professional bodybuilder, why would I be taking like lower dose super physiological doses during an off phase and then running even higher doses? So that blast and cruise, and it's stuff that you sort of gain your own understanding to your own situation and you apply it over time. And you know, I think the three of us have been very open, but also, I guess, if you want to say charitable, in that we've shared our knowledge with podcasts. Like we've not kept anything secret, or, you know, you get into the inner circle and try and figure out what's going on. And if anything, when you start to like, you gain some type of authority and you then start working with like professionals, all the stuff that you seen on the forums back in the day, what you actually then start to see with the actual professionals, half the stuff they're doing is not what's on the forums. And you're like, how do we end up in this position of like where it's all these whispers of like escalating dosages that you really see what the professionals are using to compete professionally, not get to the size that they were for professional status, is a lot lower than what people think.
No. Kurt joined the party pretty late, right?
39, 40. I can't remember if it was at 39 or 40. So, yeah. I mean, I knew, like Dean, I had some education in it, and I thought I knew. That first injection taught me a lot. And I learned every day.
Yeah.
You know, I learned about myself. I learned about other people. Yeah. And like with the pro stuff, it's wild. I mean, the genetics are so strong that stuff's all over the place. Right? This guy's used a lot. This guy's used very little. There's guys, you know, I had an experience this last pro show that just happened. A lot of them, they don't even do some of the basic stuff that I needed to do to be a shitty bodybuilder, like track your electrolytes. Some of them don't pay any attention to that shit. They don't need to. It's wild. You know, I asked a pro that I I help how much sodium he was taking, and he had no idea. 4 days out, no clue.
Whoa, 40 days out.
He doesn't need to, you know what I mean? But that's made a difference between, you know what I mean, the third place finish and the first place finish. But it just shows that like all the crazy stuff, all the details you put in at that level, maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, some guys were just born to do this stuff, you know?
Yeah, some guys just look fucking crisp. Give them any amount of sodium, any amount of water with their carbohydrates, and they just come out looking crisp as fuck.
Yeah, I've seen it happen many times. Some guys are just, it doesn't matter what they do. They grow and they stay lean and they can make all the mistakes. And then the problem is, of course, when they get to the highest level, they got away with all these mistakes. So they don't really know how to piece it together unless they sign up with a good coach who can kind of direct them. And then it's usually a fight against themselves because they never had to do more than 10 minutes of cardio, and they never had to measure all their meals, and they never had to do daily administrations. They just do 2 shots a week, and that was it, you know? So all these little adjustments then later come on, and that's what separates the real winners from the guys that don't progress. And we see that at the pro circuit quite a bit now. Like some guys that just don't really progress from a certain point, and they just stuck, and then they blame the judges, and I don't know what to change, and this and that. Get with a good coach and start living the lifestyle that all the amateurs are living that are not there yet and really want to turn pro, but they don't have the genetics. Right? They have to leverage every single little thing and treat it like a full-time job. And that's where the changes happen.
Well,
some guys can't just commit, you know?
You look at it historically, for younger guys that don't get like where bodybuilding came from, like Rich Gaspari was the first one to track food. He became obsessed with calorie books and stuff. Lee Haney, when he was winning Mr. Olympia, never tracked his food. He said, what if he fell flat, he'd eat another potato, but he never measured anything. He didn't need to. Right. And before that, Frank Zane used to track his stuff in the 70s, but no one cared. Arnold didn't. Arnold couldn't tell you how much he ate. He had no idea. Danny Padilla, when he used to compete, same thing. He would look at some calories, but he was just guessing, and he wouldn't be particular with his food. Before the 1980 Olympia, he would just reduce his calories going into the show, but he would still eat garbage food. He would eat pizza. He would just eat a little piece of pizza. But again, the genetics are so strong, it didn't matter. Right. You can't, Mike Mentzer. Mike Mentzer used to eat freaking muffins with butter. You know, you can't copy stuff. That's just how that works.
Let the amphetamines do their job, you know?
Yeah, well, crystal meth probably helped a ton there. And 3 grams a deca.
Yeah, so thank God for Retatrutide nowadays to blunt your appetite.
Yeah. What's up, y'all? So it's been a while since I checked the YouTube analytics. So it's looking like 55% of y'all are not subscribed. And if you guys have found value from this podcast during your 1 hour cardio sessions, then if you'd like to help support the pod, if you could just click the subscribe and the bell button if you haven't already, it'll help us immensely. And I'm sure you guys have noticed as the podcast has grown, it's been easier and easier for me to reach out and get guests on that used to never give me an ounce of their time. So it's all thanks to you guys that we can have these conversations that 5 years ago, I couldn't really even have in person, nor was I comfortable to. And the world is changing year by year. And it's all thanks to you guys supporting content like this and making this a very open space. So if you guys would also like to support the podcast, code Nile for Young LA and Huge Supplements. Young LA is the clothing brand I've worn in a bunch of my podcasts you guys may have seen. Probably about 90% of what I've worn is like Young LA, whereas the other 10% probably like thrift stores, maybe Amazon. And Huge Supplements is the company that I have that whey protein and whey isolate. That's like really, really sweet. I like to mix it to Ninja Creamies. And then the Magnify and the pre-workout products that give me a good pump, but also makes it look juicy whenever you're trying to take those after pics to show people that I gym sometimes. So I appreciate you guys, and we'll get back to the episode. Well, my devil's advocate position is I think that's where the art form comes in. Like you have, for me, bodybuilding is, you got a great portion of it that's science, but then you still have this portion of it that's art, and just how well that person can pinpoint what you look like and predict what you're going to look like. Obviously, predicting what you're going to look like is based off of previous experiences. So that's more of like, your own little experiments with that client. But in the end, I think there's certain guys like Chris Aceto, they'll just be like, yeah, I just pull it out of my ass. And then you end up looking crisp as fuck. And you're just like, I guess this guy has just seen that many physiques over the course of like that many decades that he just has it,
He's super hands-on, but
Even
he
if the
wouldn't
food's
know
random.
how to explain why things are happening.
Yeah. Kurt, is there any way that you might be able to turn up your mic volume a little bit?
Yeah.
I think it's soft for everybody. Dean and Niall also. But you might have to fix it in post-production.
Okay.
Niall, what's new on your end?
I just finished 8 weeks off cycle, and now I'm jumping back on. I'm so excited, bro. This is going to be my biggest cycle ever.
Yeah.
I ended the last one. I'm probably going to go up to 750 test, 650 primo, or maybe 800 test and 700 primo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then sometimes I like to add like 50 to 75 milligrams of NPP a week just to like make myself like a little bit less horny, you know, kind of just reduce the distractions, you know.
If I get like I want a little bit NPP to save my joints because I'm going to be so freaky strong, but you're using it for a different reason. I guess there's a place for that too.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I wanted to ask you guys, because I know there's not too much research on this, but I feel like it's a very interesting thing to talk about. But how much are genomic versus non-genomic responses applicable to our stack design and our total body optimization? Like, what are some genomic versus non-genomic effects?
So the rate limit on muscle growth seems to be in the ribosome, where protein synthesis is actually occurring, and that's genomic, right? So that's why doses vary, even response to exercise varies. It used to be thought of as like an mTOR thing or an androgen receptor. Even if you're bombarding your androgen receptor downstream, if there's nothing, like if you don't have a ton of ribosomes, there's just not the same amount occurring. And you'll see that with even lack of food, right? Food itself doesn't drive muscle growth. There's an energy requirement, but it's not, right? More food doesn't equal more muscle after a point, right? But again, that's because of the ribosomes. So genetically gifted people have more ribosomes. They have more androgen receptors. They have better androgen receptors. So I would say a ton. Non-genomic stuff, strength, right? Aggression, right?
Okay.
Dean, I mean, there's some magnification there. One of the reasons why Anadrol works synergistically with type 1 steroids, class 1 steroids, but it's not going to drive a ton of growth on its own.
Yeah, I think from the mechanism of action with non-genomic is like cell surface, and then genomic is intracellular.
And right.
Like you're looking
based off the speed to it, which it
exactly. So
occurs, right?
Non-genomic is rapid. Think of it like it's interacting at the cell surface. It's rapid. It's hours. Whereas genomic or intracellular, we're talking like hours into days. So it's a much more broader effect. And that's sort of where, you know, my view with like non-genomic effects from or extracellular effects with orals, for example, where we know androgen receptor affinity intracellularly versus like Kurt said, the class 1 steroids, you're not seeing the same effect on genomic expression for, say, protein accrual or ribosome translation and transcription. But you're still seeing potential amplifications to calcium signaling, which then aids with muscular contraction or force production within the nervous system, or within the brain where you're seeing rapid calcium changes, which is obviously how our neurons are dictated off a calcium sodium channel balance to fire the neurons. So you can see then changes to dopamine signaling. So now you've taken a very fast acting compound like, say, halotestin or anadrol pre-workout or pre-competition, and you see that very fast 1 to 2 hour effect. If the person has, say, the psychology or the setup to utilize that effect. If you're looking at like muscle building, it's going to be the genomic impact all day long.
And if you have drugs like Anadrol and Winstrol specifically, not only non-genomic things going on, but both of those drugs stimulate creatine production in the liver. So you're getting that immediate. That's why people will use Anavar pre-workout, because you're just getting a constant supply of extra creatine that'll make you stronger, as well as the calcium ions. But the problem there is it pulls those 3 amino acids to make creatine out, to the liver. So you have less available amino acids for protein synthesis. That's the reason why the anabolic rating on both of those drugs don't line up in humans. So in a rat's liver, it doesn't do that. In a rat's liver, it'll cause muscle growth. In a human's liver, it'll cause creatine production.
Oh, wow.
And I figured that out at Merck, looking at the metabolites with Trenbolone, because we have charts for all the different animals and all the different products that they yield in different animals. And you could see that, that's why all that anabolic rating stuff's off, because roosters and rats and stuff, their liver is going to be different.
That's why you see the metabolites in humans and animals differ vastly.
And even amongst humans, females' livers respond slightly different than a male's liver. That's why growth hormone is different in females than men. That's why orals are different, right? So a woman can take Anavar and gain a bunch of muscle. I don't know a lot of dudes that are gaining muscle on Anavar. Again, it has to do with estrogen's response at the liver and how it's modulating its effects there.
Okay. This might be a dumb question, but could someone just drink EAAs during that workout to help supply those amino acids, or does that
help?
Yeah,
it would help. But again, the one problem with EAAs, and I use them probably mostly for flavoring, is the body doesn't love amino acids. It likes di and tripeptides. So they're not going to be as effective as eating whole protein.
Yeah, I think with essential amino acids, you're just supplying a good ratio to initiate protein synthesis. So you get a good amount of leucine, isoleucine, valine, and then the rest of the essential amino acids. But it's a complement to maybe some whey protein or collagen protein, and put that all together. And it's the same with the non-genomic responses. If they deplete creatine, it would make sense to supplement with a little bit of creatine pre-workout and maybe some electrolytes to help facilitate the muscular contractions. So you would, like a long-acting steroid that has genomic responses, you would mostly focus on your nutrition, whereas with the non-genomic pre-workout androgens, the oral steroids, you would have some sort of pre-workout cocktail alongside of that to help optimize the non-genomic signals. And that's why a pre-workout cocktail can be infinitely complicated, but also enjoyable. But in the end, you get hypertrophy signaling. It's not like it's resulting in direct anabolism. The anabolism comes later from the long-acting esters and the protein intake alongside the non-genomic or the genomic response.
But you also don't want, Dean might know more of this than I do. You also don't want mTOR constantly. You're not trying to constantly stimulate mTOR all day long by drinking amino acids in between your meals, because mTOR is like a peptide receptor similar to insulin. It's going to downregulate with constant exposure, right? So mTOR seems to be much better activated when there's windows in between, right?
Okay.
Like you want to go a couple hours in between feeding, so mTOR actually responds, versus constantly trying to push amino acids in all the time.
Is that a better explanation for 2.5 3 hour windows between meals?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably even go 4 or 5. I eat more frequently because there's no way to get the food in if I'm spacing out every 5 hours. Right, but yeah, I mean, more so in a natural person, because on steroids things are kind of ramped up all the time anyway.
Yeah, you have more protein retention or nitrogen retention in skeletal muscles, so there's more amino acids available. Yeah. Whereas with natural, you have a cap on that as well.
The liver's not breaking them down either.
Right. Yeah.
I think the other useful thing that we now understand with obviously that protein timing or protein spacing is there is no cap to the amount of protein that you can absorb. So that whole 30, 40 gram per meal cap that was once stated has been disproven. So we've done studies where 100 grams of protein was given to humans and then tracked obviously the tracer spacing of how that protein was absorbed. So if you got the digestive capacity, of course, you can take on higher amounts of protein. But the bigger question when it comes to muscle protein synthesis seems to be the 24-hour availability of amino acids rather than acutely spacing. Like what one of the theories was the leucine threshold that Kurt's on about, where 2 to 3 grams of leucine seems to be the trigger that switches on mTOR. And mTOR tends to have a residual active time, because you would never say half-life, active time of its mechanism of action of about 3 to 4 hours. And that's why they suggest, you space out meals of 30 to 40 grams of protein. That's a complete protein source where you're getting that 2 to 3 grams of leucine in order to switch MPS on. But MPS isn't, mTOR isn't the only critical factor for protein accrual. We know mechanical tension and progressive overload and those external stimulus effects to initiate change in a muscle are just as important as switching the machinery on. Otherwise, taking 3 grams of leucine every 3 hours would result in muscle protein synthesis, but it doesn't without the stimulus effect.
Mm-hmm. The other thing with muscle protein synthesis is that's not a good guide of muscle growth occurring, because muscle protein synthesis is ramped up during injury, right? So if you cut yourself, muscle protein synthesis goes up. That doesn't mean there's new tissue being created. So it's the studies that using that for growth don't necessarily show that there's actually growth occurring.
And I think part of the equation is also the anti-catabolic response that you get from some steroids, right? By whether that's inhibition of the glucocorticoid steroids or just making sure that when mTOR is downregulated and AMPK is elevated, that you don't tap into skeletal muscle for energy production, but in the stored body fat or in the stored glycogen. And I think that part is also important in the equation, because the less muscle protein you break down, the more you preserve and you build on top of that in a step-by-step fashion. Whereas a lot of guys, on the diet, they go on thyroid medication and all the mitochondrial peptides that shut down mTOR. And then slowly over time, they kind of wither away because they're actively breaking down the muscle tissue, even if they have some sort of glucocorticoid inhibition in place. Whether that's with phosphatidylserine or emodin or trembolone or anavar, anything that blocks the glucocorticoid receptors, or actually like halotestin prevents the breakdown of glucocorticoids, but it also inhibits the receptor. So you get this weird dynamic of high blood pressure. So all these things you kind of have to look into and then optimize everything for what you want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what
I don't think it's necessarily bad to shut off mTOR for 4 hours, 8 hours, because that happens during training anyway. Yeah. Like training increases MOT-C levels and downregulates mTOR.
Yeah. And what Dean was saying about the leucine threshold is also age dependent. That's one of the reasons why elderly people lose muscle. It's not just hormones. As you age, we have splenic extraction. So our spleen pulls amino acids out of our digestive system to use for energy. And that increases as we age. And then the leucine threshold also goes up. You need more leucine the older you get. And then elderly people tend to eat less. So they're eating less, but they need much more. It's why like a glass of milk can stimulate protein synthesis in a young child, but it's not enough for any of us.
Yeah, that's why one of the hallmarks of longevity is skeletal muscle, because you have this reservoir of amino acids that you can use later on in life. Yeah. Of course, until you get an injury and you have full-blown sarcopenia, but that's where the longevity really takes a hit.
Yeah. I was just going to say with absorption, the medical definition of not absorbing something is diarrhea. So when people say, oh, you can't absorb that, well, you would know if you're not absorbing it because it's going to come out the other end.
Right.
And that's what they're starting to think, that some of the, anabolic resistance in elderly people is due to changes in the gut microbiome and the enterocytes of the gut, where like what you're talking about, the malabsorption of the amino acids isn't correct in that they're just not being pulled into systemic circulation towards muscle protein synthesis. You're still utilizing those amino acids for other causes. I think something that was really interesting that I read a long time ago, and it's a paper. I think the researcher was called Slater. I remember writing a piece about this. In order to put on 1 kilo of muscle tissue, so that's 2.2 pounds, you need something like an energy surplus of, I think it's about 1,600 calories per kilogram was what I can sort of remember from the paper. Something like that the energy cost to make about 2.2 pounds of muscle mass was about 1,600 calories. And this is sort of where the whole thing that came out before about you don't need to eat in a massive surplus in order to create muscle mass. But what you still need to facilitate is your daily, maintenance requirement of amino acids or protein in the body is about 4 to 5 grams. And then in order to put on a pound of muscle tissue, which is about 440 grams, something like that, you need an extra, I think it's 6 to 8 grams of protein retained per day. So when we're looking to create 1 pound of muscle mass per month, we need about 15 grams of amino acids being retained from our nutrition into our composition goals of muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein repair, whether that's your skin, your hair, your nails, blah, blah, blah. So that's sort of where when we look at the energy cost of creating a pound of muscle mass, when people are saying in terms of eating at maintenance level and you look at the energy cost to create that pound of muscle mass, it's not as high as you think, but the background theory of being able to retain those amino acids and create the stimulus where the amino acids are utilized locally is where that nuance comes in then of like progressive overload and muscle hypertrophy in tandem with your nutrition.
Yeah. And only 10% of dietary amino acids go toward muscle. Like Dean said, there's many more important things in the body, like ATP, that need amino acids, not just muscle mass.
Yeah, just basic bodily functions.
Yeah.
Because if you look at how the liver operates, I mean, it's a lot of energy is being utilized there.
Yeah. When I think a common mistake too in bodybuilding is that on gear, guys think they need more protein. You technically need less on steroids because you're recycling them. You're not losing them.
Yeah.
Right. So a bodybuilder that eats 400 grams of protein is really not needed if they're on a big cycle. Right?
Yeah, or unless they don't eat any carbohydrates, which are protein sparing, you know. So like my protein intake is a little bit higher than usual because I do better on a ketogenic diet. Is it good for muscle building? Not really. Did I get big enough on it? Sure. I still got 240, 50 pounds. It's fine. If I wanted to be 300 pounds, I'd need some protein sparing carbohydrates in there. And actually, then I'd rather have 1,000 grams of carbs and maybe 180, 175 grams of protein.
Are there any theories to support the opposite, though? Say that somebody is consuming 300 to 400 grams of protein.
There's theories, but in practice...
What's the number, Dean, that can contribute to hypertrophy? 1.2 grams per pound?
Yeah, I think it's if you look at like the ISSN's recommendations goes from like 1 gram per kilogram up to 3 grams per kilogram. And 3 grams per kilogram works out, I think, about 1.2 to 1.3 grams per pound. The analogy, I guess, that where we sort of arrive today with more protein means more muscle growth, especially in enhanced athletes, is potentially that the thought process was if you've got more androgens in the body, more androgen receptor activation, you have more likelihood for the machinery to build muscle protein. But when you start having excess of protein beyond like how quickly can you retain and build that muscle tissue, you start to see that the new science that has come out in the last couple of years in terms of a lower protein take. So historically, I remember reading all this when I first got into bodybuilding like nearly 20 years ago, was the golden number for enhanced bodybuilders was about 1.8 to 2 grams per pound protein. That was like where you were told to put your protein. Have we all tried it? Well, I certainly have. I've had like 1.7 to 1.8 grams per pound protein. The last time I competed before I retired, my protein was around, I think, 1.4, 1.5 grams per pound. So a little bit lower, but I was eating a ton of carbohydrates. Could that protein have come down much lower? Well, now in retirement, I hold 85, 86 kilos. So what's that? 186, 187 pounds. And I eat probably, on a good day, about 170 or 180 grams of protein, which is below 1 gram per pound. And I've lost no muscle mass really. And even then, like even training the gym, I can't remember the last time I done a bodybuilding split with martial arts now. So it's very difficult if you're still utilizing a muscle for something other than progressive overload or lifting in the gym, and you're eating like that, what people are saying now, 0.7, 0.8 gram per pound, you're still getting enough to either retain what you have present or build more muscle mass. Mm-hmm. what would be probably interesting is if I just kept my diet as it is, and obviously dose escalated, and all I done was just manipulate my carbohydrates and my training overload and my strength. Would that prove, for me personally anyway, as an N equals 1, gaining muscle mass by not changing my protein, but changing just the energy requirement for more carbohydrates?
So what I've done many times in an off season is escalate the dosages and the carbohydrates while taking the protein down to facilitate better digestion, because the protein is a little bit more difficult to digest than simple carbohydrates, right? If you go with
for sure
cream of rice or some fruit or regular rice or potatoes, sweet potatoes, whatever the client prefers, at one point you can end up protein pretty low and the carbohydrates disgustingly high. We're talking about 1,000 grams per day, or maybe between 500 to 1,000, depending on the workout, right? Your carb cycle based on your activity levels. And then maybe protein goes up a little bit more on rest days, because that usually follows a quad workout, for example. So I think the protein requirement is highly dependent on your carbohydrate intake and how much steroids you take. But yeah, escalating your steroid doses upwards and then escalating the protein intake upwards, and then being in this crazy surplus, that's a great way to increase your blood urea nitrogen and your creatinine levels, and maybe even your uric acid, depending on your food sources. And does that put more burden on your kidneys? Maybe. As soon as you stay hydrated, the blood pressure, we did a whole podcast on this. But now I think people are a little bit more intelligent, and the amount of kidney issues documented in the fitness industry are also significantly less compared to this phase where everybody was doing high protein and that stuff. Is that the mitochondrial peptides which help and blood pressure management? I'm sure that contributes also. Did anybody, Kurt, Dean, did anybody reach out recently with kidney failure? Because that used to be like me and Dante Trudel would get these emails every fucking month, my cystatin C is 3. Protein in urine is +3. I haven't had any of those in a long time.
I've seen one in 4 years.
Okay. That's good. Because that seems to be like a previous generation thing where everybody had kidney failure, but only half of the guys actually talk about it.
I feel like that's got to be more related to the blood pressure, though.
Yeah.
But for sure that it's so multifactorial.
Yeah, and then maybe the mitochondrial stuff, because like SS31 and MOTC and SLU, that they have some kidney protective benefits, because the mitochondria are highly active in the kidneys. And if you damage your mitochondria, all the oxidative stress and poor nutritional intake, then obviously your kidneys are going to get the beating first, right? Besides the blood pressure and the other stuff.
And I guess even like stack design, not to create inference, but we'll see now, this is probably a good thing with EQ, where EQ historically linked to kidney toxicity. With the resurgence or the renaissance of EQ coming back, are we going to see in 2 years' time a repeat of kidney issues? Or people are using now EQ alongside all the mitochondria optimization strategies, blood pressure management, antioxidants, blah, blah. We might not see anything. And you sort of then see the change in the culture from the education, where a compound that was once viewed off limits from a kidney perspective, or you really need to understand what you're doing if you're going to use this compound. We've reduced the potential risk with that compound from other strategies being employed. But it's like, I guess like anything over time, bodybuilders and their views towards nutrition, the quality of the food they're eating, especially like a high level, rather than going out and like smashing McDonald's and all that 90s
Shots
bodybuilders would it, I guess from a nutrition perspective, we still have guys who eat junk to an extent to keep their calorie requirements up, but we now view the importance of what nutrition does from an oxidative stress perspective, and understanding that, okay, yeah, there's scenarios where you might need to utilize some level of junk food, but rather than being like 80% of your nutrition, it falls to 10%, which is what it always probably should have been.
What's that inflammatory fatty acid?
Arachidonic acid,
yeah,
and omega-6.
So I think some of that junk food is just a source of arachidonic acid. And I think you can either supplement with that to get some sort of inflammatory response, or you go with a lot of meat, like a lot of beef in your diet, because it's saturated with arachidonic acid as well. And anecdotally, a lot of guys grew pretty well on just an all beef diet. Right? Well, your skin get thicker, obviously, but you can fix that with some changes during a cut.
There's a lot of the coaches that do have like red meat around, particularly around the workout. Whether or not that may be more beneficial or not, but I supplemented with arachidonic acid from huge supplements like the last couple of years on leg days, which would make the next few days pretty fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'd say between that, the IGF-1, the only other thing that was different was like training volume and how I trained.
Yeah, your legs came up a lot the last couple of years.
Yeah. I do sometimes forget to mention that the arachidonic acid, that I also took that sometimes aside from the IGF-1 on leg days.
Yeah, it's not exciting to talk about because it's just a supplement. So it's like fish oil and creatine. It's more interesting to talk about IGF-1. You were taking what, IGF-1 DES or IGF-1 LR3?
LR3. It's the only one that seems to be pretty readily available from HRT clinics these days. So I don't know if people can get DES prescribed that easily.
I know. I might have a guy for you that has recombinant. I already put him in touch with you.
Oh. I still have yet to try that Vigorous.
Yeah. Niall's going to mutate just like I did.
I did try the ATX
I took a boatload of Increlex, right? And I think it aged my face a little bit. So now I've been off of it I remember when I look at like pictures when I was running it heavily, I look a little bit more weathered, but I was also training pretty hard. So maybe, all the grimacing probably didn't help.
Yeah. Okay. What do you guys think about Epicatechin?
Epicatechin. I ran it, but it raised my inflammatory markers.
Yeah.
I only use it from one source. So I've talked to one person who had the same issue, and also with other products of that source. And then I talked with a couple other people who never got that issue from the same source and other sources. So there might be like some sort of individual response where some people just don't respond well to Epicatechin. Did it give me results? Yes, but my inflammatory markers were like 22. So as soon as I saw that it discontinued, I stopped for a week. My inflammation came back down to 3 or something. Then I started it again for a couple of days. The maximum dose of what was 700 milligrams or something like that, something crazy high. And then it came up again. So I never bothered getting it from another source because I switched to injectable YK11, and that didn't increase my inflammatory markers at all and gave me better results because you got the follistatin inhibition or the myostatin inhibition through raising follistatin, and then an anabolic response through the androgen receptor. So personally, Epicatechin is cute. Did it do something? Absolutely. Was it as good as injectable YK11? No.
Mm-hmm. I guess that is interesting though, because it's just a flavonoid, right?
Yeah.
It's like technically a supplement.
So I'm not sure if it's like a manufacturing thing where they put some sort of binders in there that irritate the stomach lining or cause an inflammation. I mean, I tried ACE083. I have that at home also. And that increased my inflammatory markers as well. So maybe there's something alongside with follistatin. And I tried to do, a lot of research on this, but I can't find anything in the scientific evidence, but it hasn't really been investigated. There's no clinical trials on Epicatechin, YK11, ACE083 where they measure inflammation before and after.
Yeah. I might try experimenting with that myself.
In full effect still.
Yeah. You send me your sources and I will avoid those.
No. They're actually the ones bringing this to the market, but you just have to try it first because, like, if you check ACE083 and it's produced in bacteriostatic water, right? Okay, you can send it to Januszek or the Chromate or wherever. They will check for the active pharmaceutical ingredient, not for the carrier oil. But they also don't check for how your body responds. And so you would need to go to the clinical data to kind of piece that together and then try it yourself. So, eventually you're going to have to get your hands dirty and do the blood work. So I did some blood work this weekend and I saw my inflammatory markers. High sensitivity C-reactive protein was 9.6. Like, okay, let's get that down, run the experiment again. If it comes back up again, then it's not suitable for long-term use, unfortunately. But time will tell.
Right.
Time will tell. I'll keep everybody updated through the Q&A. Like other experiments that are around, they were a great success, right? So there's also no clinical data on it. And me and Dean have sacrificed our health potentially with all this mitochondrial stuff early on. And yeah, because there's only rodent models. So we were like, fuck it, we'll give it a try. We got the benefits from it. And now everybody has adopted it. But yeah, it could have turned out bad. And maybe the SLU megadoses could have both given us cancer. And then we wouldn't be sitting here.
Well, I have yet to be the adventurous one to go above 600 micrograms. So, but I will say, I retrialed 600 micrograms for a couple of weeks with training for the latest competitions, and I definitely did see an effect similar to previous years. You know, I hadn't taken it for quite some time, so. But does that prove that those low dosages are what's correct versus the big dosages? Was some of it placebo? I definitely, like, in terms of body fat and my ability to eat more food or eat more carbohydrates, because that's normally what I leverage in my diet if I'm hungry now. Definitely the 600 micrograms brought a huge benefit. I guess the thing about Epicatechin is, if you view it in the same light as something like resveratrol, obviously resveratrol is slightly different as a polyphenol, but things like flavonoids, polyphenols, our absorption or our ability to utilize them from the gut themselves is quite low. So if we're looking at like Epicatechin, potentially how it's being delivered into the body as just an oral supplement, we might not see the changes over to Follistatin and Myostatin or IGF-1. If you look, there's a couple of papers covering the mechanism of Epicatechin and muscle growth. It'd be very interesting to see if someone created like a liposomal version or a very sparse where you have like this cold water immersion technology for very poor soluble compounds. Would you see a change to the effect then if we're able to get it into systemic circulation and get it intracellularly, which is what the whole point of a liposome is? Then you might see some meaningful change. Like in Steve's case, probably wasn't reaching the target area. And it's just as a consequence.
I think it is because I did gain more strength and recovery was better, but I also was more inflamed. Again, I can't check my serum follistatin and myostatin levels. I tried to look for it, but there was some place where you could do it with an oral swab, but they didn't send to Thailand. So I definitely did think that it did something on the skeletal muscle level. It was made with peperine, so that should increase bioavailability and absorption a little bit. But yeah, for me, it was not sustainable. And again, it's just part of the experimentation process. And if you're spending X amount of money and you get high inflammation versus somewhere else where you get more results and no inflammation, then it's easier. But that's
an interesting thing then. So when you were taking the Epicatechin, was that the only source of BioPerine as a supplement?
The BioPerine, yeah. So maybe it's the BioPerine.
People don't realize BioPerine's job is basically to punch a hole in your gut wall, to let things go through the gut into the bloodstream.
But I've taken other supplements with BioPerine or BioPerine, and it never did it.
That's interesting, because normally that's sort of where if someone has leaky gut or dysbiosis, I tell them to avoid BioPerine. And it's in bloody every supplement. People think, well, just throw BioPerine into this to improve how we absorb the compound or to absorb the supplement. Some things like, curcuminoids, PQQ, I put a small amount in our B complex of supplement needs. But people look at BioPerine or black pepper extract and think that it's harmless, but it actually makes your gut more permeable. And it's more permeable to everything, not just the supplement you've swallowed. So there could have been something there that was allowing LPS in your gut or endotoxins to go from your gut into your bloodstream. And that's where the the C-reactive protein or the inflammatory marker increase came from.
Maybe the capsules had endotoxins.
Makes sense.
And then the bioperine allowed them in, but it has nothing to do with the epicatechin. But I've heard several people have that issue and others didn't. So it really made it difficult to put your finger on it. But for me, the risk to reward was not there. So I just stopped it.
That all makes sense. Especially because you would want to assume that something that's like where most of the credible research is on benefits of vascular health, function, and metabolic health.
It's very robust scientific evidence. I did a deep dive on it and I was very impressed. And I was a little bit disappointed and sad that I got my inflammatory markers that high, because if C-reactive protein was normal, like before the experiment, I would have continued with it. And I would have recommended it to people. But after talking to some other people in the fitness space, they got similar responses or none at all. So that makes it a little bit inconclusive and difficult to give a recommendation.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody has, wants to give the experiment a try with before and after blood work, go for it. But with anything, like if it really worked, everybody would be using it. All right. It's not like Anadrol.
You started a lot of things, so hey, maybe we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? Maybe somebody's going to brew some injectable epicatechin, Everything is injectable now. Injectable 5-amino-1Q, SLU, and all that stuff. The oral SLU PP915 I'm running right now, and that's pretty potent. But it's a little bit difficult to, like a dose conversion from the 332 to the 915. It's a little bit difficult. So I'm running 10 milligrams now, 915, and it's not as potent as 100 milligrams 332, but it comes close. Yeah, it's hard to say.
On that note, what do you guys think about Follistatin and Brian Moscow's new Follistatin that they've proposed to have less negative effects on blood work and CRP? Have you tried it at all?
I was offered. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I think things like Follistatin, how we're looking to the future to switch on and off genes and all that sort of stuff. It's like going back to the conversation of genomic versus non-genomic when it comes to androgens. You start messing around with machinery that should have a kill switch, if you want to call it that. If we're looking at what we've covered before in other anabolic roundtables, is that when people reach like their ceiling of growth, we tend to view that there's potentially something going on in the background where myostatin is leveraged too high, and it's basically saying, well, back off. You're getting to the point where the heart, the kidney, the liver, etc., we're at like maximum biology where the body's intelligent enough to know that you're going to kill yourself if you keep growing at this rate. If you take that kill switch away by inhibiting follistatin, or you inhibit myostatin, and you're excessively growing, just like the theory of androgens and spilling over onto other androgen receptors. So if you take a massive dose of androgens, it's not just muscle mass it's acting on the brain, the heart, the skin, the hair, blah, blah. If you start inhibiting follistatin or myostatin in things like the heart or other organs that are surrounded by muscle, or like the heart itself being a muscle, you're potentially opening the gateway for something that you can't irreversibly go back on. So I'm intrigued. Like everything, I'm intrigued by the science. I'm intrigued by the potential for compounds here to exceed, what we're sort of seeing in terms of human physiology is once you get above 300 pounds, we're starting to see guys who are never exponentially growing. You might see someone get to 350, 400, but the effort required to get there and the health detriment to get there is not something that your average, 200-pound person's ever going to aspire to do. So with these new follistatin or myostatin inhibitor peptides and the carriers and the delivery systems, I'd just be with everything, the intrigue to experiment is great, and everyone is free to make those decisions, but really think of the risk to benefit analysis of, if this goes wrong, how wrong can it go? And what is the backup or the fail safe of if you've inhibited follistatin and myostatin, how can you restart that machinery if things start going wrong, other than waiting for the compound you've taken to clear out?
Yeah, because supposedly it has a very long half-life. The problem is that with this compound that they developed, there's no scientific evidence. Right? On their website, they reference other compounds as, I don't know whether that's a unique selling point or to kind of bring it to market. And I haven't seen any robust before and after pictures or before and after blood work or before and after organ imaging for me to be convinced to give it a try. And that's why I'd rather take ACE083, because that has some scientific evidence in animal models and human subjects. And ACE083, unlike these other follistatin products, but again, no scientific evidence to back it up, ACE083 is inactivated in the bloodstream, so it only works locally. So wherever you want muscle growth, you have to inject it at the clinical dose of 200 milligrams, which I think is way too high because it kind of makes you feel off and inflamed, obviously. So you would spike body parts that you would want to improve at maybe 25 milligrams to 50 milligrams, depending on what you can tolerate. And again, if you're willing to subject yourself to chronic systemic inflammation, if that was the cause of it. Whereas with these other ones, follistatin works systemically. ACE031, Trevogrumab, Garetosmab, did this one from, Biolongevity Labs. If it all works systemically, I would need to see some solid evidence that it doesn't increase heart size or liver size or kidney size or whatever. Whereas you can make that research with the other compounds because those had clinical trials or human scientific data. Is it super in depth? No, because I was looking at the inflammatory signals and I couldn't find anything there either. So, and until I see somebody else turn into a freak, I'm not interested.
Okay. Well, Kurt wanted me to talk to him about a test GH and Anadrol, but I wasn't really originally planning to. So we'll alter it a little bit. But what are some? You guys have discussed this a little bit in the past, especially on your Anabolic Roundtable. I know there's some new audience here, but if anything has changed in the course of the last year or so, what are the first steroids that would come to mind that you would choose to avoid?
In my mind, Superdrol, Halotestin, D-Ball, Ment, maybe Tren situation. What? No, not Ment.
What, you don't like Ment? I thought you were going to say DHB.
DHB. Yeah, DHB would be at the top of that list.
I thought Tren was S tier for Steve.
Yeah, Ment is S tier. What are you talking about, Kurt? Continue, please. Continue.
I've used Ment with no problems. It's sometimes hard to manage.
Yeah, it's not a beginner drug, that's for sure.
It's not a beginner drug for sure. I mean, Tren in most people. It depends what you're talking about. Like, you talk about competitors, you talk about lifestyle guys. I think I'm getting more conservative as I get older. I feel like lifestyle guys should be like test maybe GH, maybe Primo. I'm not even. No. I wouldn't even consider EQ as a lifestyle drug anymore. I think too many people think that that's a good choice. I don't know. Maybe I think it's more intermediate or advanced for bodybuilding.
Yeah, for competitors.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
for competitors, you don't avoid anything because you want to win.
Well, that's what I was about to say. That I think as time has gone on and the availability of information, and I say this quite a bit with consults of hyperfixating on like what else can I add is always the question. Like, what else can I add?
Yeah.
Rather than when you actually delve into like the I guess the simpler things or the more shittier things of like, how's your sleep? How's your training? How's your progressive overload? How's, you know,
we got.
Yeah, you know,
all the drugs don't matter.
Methyltrianolone. Let's go.
You know,
Metal Tren, I would avoid.
Metal Tren. What happened to the renaissance of Dianolone after my
It's not available, Dean. Like, if you talk about something, it has to be available. Like, DHT Xenatide is available. That's some good shit.
I think, this what else can I add, or this sort of mentality of someone's taking, let's say, for example, off-season sort of setup, tests, GH, Primo, and maybe Anadrol or an oral. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, what if I added Ment? Or what if I added MPP? Or what if I added Tren? And it's sort of like, when you ask the questions around like progressive overload, are you still progressively overloading every session? Is there any signs of recovery deficits or issues towards sleep, issues towards digestion? If they're all green, then maybe you might say, okay, well, what does adding more androgens do into the equation? So what does adding another compound do over increasing the dosages of the others? And I think some of it is like the intrigue, but a lot of it can sometimes be paranoia would be a very harsh word to use, but it's almost like, oh man, but only if I added in this compound, I'm going to be much stronger. I'm going to be much bigger. There's like the last time I competed where I used next to none of the historical competition compounds, it sort of proved that a lot of guys second guessed on like, oh, so when are we adding in Winstrol, or when are we adding in Anavar, or when are we adding in Tren? There's always this sort of like old school mentality of, 6 weeks out, we better throw in the Anavar. We're now, 4 weeks out, we need Winstrol. I think like the original question of like what steroid shouldn't people use? Like Kurt said, if it's lifestyle people, which in today's age is becoming very, very popular, especially with hormone optimization, these guys see what we're talking about and almost have that intrigue of, well, I'm taking prescribed TRT. What happens if I add in X, Y, and Z? The other side of it then is a competitor who's already taken the historical compounds that are known to build muscle. And it's like, well, if I throw in this exotic thing, like let's say Ment, from a neural perspective, so to improve like your mentality towards training, dopamine drive, etc., and obviously its effects on muscle building and it being very similar towards 19 NORs. You might not necessarily need that compound, because adding in that compound might now change potentially towards a neurotoxic setup where you're gaining more muscle mass, but now you're damaging neurons. And it's again, you're sort of figuring out the pros and cons of gaining more muscle mass, but potentially getting more stupid over time or having problems when you get older. And that's sort of where, again, it comes back to like what I always say, you can have the short-term benefit, but what's the long-term gain, or what's the long-term detriment? And what you don't necessarily want is you start throwing in compounds that are causing oxidative stress or dopamine neurotoxicity, or whatever way you want to view it, that when you get to like 45, 50, you've got neurodegenerative disease. It might not be Parkinson's, it might not be Alzheimer's, but the actual firing capacity of your brain or your ability for like acetylcholine and memory and cognition is significantly hampered, where, you can probably retrain some of it, and you can, with neurogenesis and activities towards neurogenesis, or using supplements like alpha GPC, choline donors. But you're now trying to manage a problem that's manifested, that's going to be there forever, that perhaps might not have never developed if you didn't have that initial like, what if I added in this compound? So it's what I believe is a lot of people just have to stop getting greedy and thinking like more compounds is a better result.
Yeah.
But like Steve said, there is a situation where someone has to obviously then start thinking outside the box of how can I get past the plateau, or how can I get a slightly extra 1 or 2% beyond where I am now? Because when you start, but what again, I pull that back, is for a normal amateur, that extra 1 to 2% from a local competition perspective, probably risk-wise doesn't really add up. Whereas when you start getting into professional level where you're earning a career and you're earning a salary to speak or whatever from winnings, that 1 to 2% translates over into something that's, you know, if you asked any company, oh, we're going to increase profit by 2%, they'd be like, how do we do it?
Yeah.
So
that's where I am.
That's kind of what I want.
Already what I am. I'm at a point where I take drugs and it facilitates income because I come to a higher truth, right? I make deep dives. I inform the people how to use them safely. But a lot of people would still follow that, but they have no financial incentive or they don't compete. So what I do doesn't have to be copied unless you're generally interested in using that compound, but not for the sake of experimentation. Mm-hmm. I literally supply my income by taking these drugs and doing the research. And there's not a lot of people who are on that spot, on that position where you can be a professional drug user, literally, and help pay the bills that way. Because even most of the pros, they don't pay the bills with their competition. They pay the bills with affiliate sales, and that they don't have the gray market affiliates because they don't want to represent that. They represent maybe a clothing company or a protein company, right? So they're not even, it's a very weird position for me to be in. But just because I do polypharmacy doesn't mean everybody else has to do it. But if you do it, use my code. Much appreciated.
There it is.
I mean, beside like an IQ thing or getting dumber from drugs, I think something people don't talk about, like for me, it changed. I have a lot of regrets about the amount of drugs that I did over years. It changed my emotional balance and my ability to control that. I have a lot of conversations with my wife with highs and lows that were not there before. And I haven't been on any amount of anything outside TRT for a couple of years now, but the damage is done to my brain. So I have very highs and very lows, almost not like manic depression, but it tends to swing and I tend to react differently than I would have before I did those drugs. So I think people need to understand that it does change your brain permanently, these things. And it's, again, I regret it because it wasn't going to get me anywhere, right? So I use them to use them. But I don't
you have a very promising coaching career.
No, but my point is but it doesn't, I could never have been a pro bodybuilder.
No, right. Yeah.
You know, so it's like, I didn't need to do all those things. And that's kind of like how at least with lifestyle guys, I try to leverage coaching in that way is that, you know, less is generally more. Let's fix the other shit first because I don't want them to end up in a bad place from overusing this crap. Right. And you don't see it in the moment. You see it years later when you stop.
Yeah. That's
I'm
generally
sure a lot of pros would say that too. They just don't talk about it because people, right? Men are taught to not talk about that stuff.
Right.
That's just
in the exact same spot until I took an SSRI.
That's generally what I wanted to attack and what I wanted to focus on, especially since a majority of my audience are competitors. I do have some people though that I feel like are going to be future you guys. I have some like 19-year-olds that are extremely fucking smart, haven't started their first cycle, and I'm just like, wow, this is fucking sick.
Research.
But honestly, we could list out a long list of all the peptides that have helped us. You guys have heard these peptides and these research chems in the podcast maybe a million times. Peptides I've used from APR such as BPC 157 and TP 500 for soft tissue healing, Retatrutide and other GLPs, mitochondrial support such as SS31, MOT-C, 5-amino-1Q, methylene blue, SLU. There's a bunch of others. Obviously, the list goes on and on. One of my favorite things, though, that I've been utilizing, such as during my last prep, that has allowed my blood work to come basically pristine, aside from slightly elevated liver enzymes at about 60 and 130 1 week after the show. And this is after a leg day because my dumbass doesn't want to skip a training day. These are probably the things that I think are the most important. So this includes like your injectable glutathione, injectable or even just normal NAC, liposoluble glutathione, GI aids such as oral BPC, oral TB, KPV. A lot of these things have probably been very substantial in reducing oxidative stress and keeping all my blood markers down, and thus keeping me as basically healthy as fucking possible that you can be while you're bodybuilding. So I couldn't be more thankful to Mike for literally showing me the ropes and also providing me with all of these things. Even the compounded supplements that he creates for blood pressure and reducing oxidative stress on all your organs, including your cardiovascular system, your liver, and your kidneys. All of these that he creates have been very substantial, honestly. So you can find any of these at his site, aprhealthsolutions.com. And he has offered me a code Nile for you guys to use, which will offer you a 15% discount off of all of that as well. If you guys end up using those and you like him, please let me know. Shoot in a comment, just give me a DM or something. And if you ever have any problems or any questions, I'll be here too. This is a community for me, even though I don't have a fucking Discord because I'm lazy as shit, but I fucking should make one. So love you guys. And, keep training hard. Kurt, do you mind me asking, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit hard because there's so many variables, but what do you feel like particularly may have exacerbated that?
Tren and Deca. So okay. Deca gave me a lot of lows. That was usually estrogen driven. When I got my estrogen under control, it would not occur as much, but I'm sure it still had some sort of long-term toxic effect in my brain. And Tren definitely made me more aggressive, and I'm not an aggressive person, so it wasn't necessarily so outward, but I think it was in my interaction with my family, which is like the worst place to express that stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not someone who would go to a bar and get in a fight. I'm not someone who's going to start a fight with strangers. I just think an artificial level of aggression that then kind of stuck with me because my brain will still flip back to that place sometimes.
Okay.
Which is odd because I haven't touched that stuff in a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't think I realized it until after. Definitely in the moment, there were times when I took too much of it that like I could feel it coming, right? And all of us have probably injected enough Tren that all of a sudden you could feel it in your blood.
Yeah.
And you're like, you got to get a filter, right? You can't just say what's on your mind because crazy shit will come out. Yeah, mostly those two. I don't think the other ones really did much. It just something to watch out for. But again, if you're competing, Nick Walker said something funny to me once. He said, I hate when competitors tell me that they don't use Tren. He goes, my response is, did you win? So
yeah.
Wait,
if you want to win, you're going to have to take some risks.
You do what you got to do. You got to do what you do. But like, is it needed for a lifestyle guy? No. I mean, there's tons of levers you could pull, to get a great physique without using stuff like that.
Yeah. And if you do want to use it, use a low dose. 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams a week, like me and Dean have preached.
That was less than I would use in a day. I mean,
I've been to 150 a day.
I mean, I tried 150 a day until my organs start to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I also don't have I don't have a medium switch. I have an on and an off. I think that's like an addictive thing. So I don't know what low drug use looks like. This is the only time in my life that I've ever used anything at like a super moderate dose for long periods of time.
Because you're still in TRT, right? A couple hundred milligrams.
I've been 200, 100 twice a week is all I'm doing. Yeah. And GH. I don't have the capacity for it anymore. I don't have the desire for it anymore. I don't need to be any bigger.
Right.
My head's just not there anymore.
Right.
I think we all grow out of it at some point.
Yeah. And if you're maintaining on a moderate dose then, or an exciting TRT dose, then why bother,
Yeah. Well, or at least if you achieve it, right? Like something that I'm super proud of is that I achieved for my genetics a physique that I was proud of, that I strived for, I got there, right? A lot of people never accomplish their goals. Like I got there, I was able to then back off and look at that and say, that was an accomplishment. Let's put that on a shelf. And now I can help other people versus I think there's a lot of guys my age that just never quite got there. So they're going to continue to push as long as they can. And then their health will fail.
Yeah. And at 50, it's going to be hard to really get that.
Yeah.
Freaky physique.
Yeah. So, it's coming from a slightly different perspective, but,
I'm like 10 years past my prime already. Like I peaked at 35 and I've been dying, I've been holding on for dear life. And now with the quad tear, I'm kind of like, you know what? 600 milligrams a week. That's enough.
I think just from what Kurt said there, I think it's very interesting when you think about like that ego dissociation. And like when I originally retired, quote unquote, in 2022, in my mind, I still had like all unanswered questions. I had like what ifs, and you're training in the gym. You're still following a bodybuilding lifestyle once you've finished on that sort of stage or scene. And then eventually, going back in 2024 to do that like one last prep and settle all the what ifs in my head, stepping away from, like, when I got off stage at the British Championships, I was able to say, that's it, done. And like, even my wife said to me, is that you done? And I was able to say, like, hand on heart, that's it. That ego is dissociated, and I can fully put that on a shelf and look at the trophies on the mantelpiece and whatever, and be reminded of the work that was done, but still continue with physique progress in a different goal-orientated fashion. But sometimes I think about, is it like when we're talking about the changes to the neurochemistry and the neurology aspect, that the dissociation of the ego becomes much more difficult because you're relying on the androgens for that dopamine stimulation. And so you come off and you dissociate from that ego, but because the brain has changed in terms of its dopamine threshold or the amount of dopamine that you're producing, or there's an imbalance to dopamine serotonin, it's a lot harder to dissociate from that competitive side if you're much older. Let's say someone who's like late 40s, 50s, who really should be maybe moving away, or, that is their life and they want to keep competing. But let's say they've had enough, they want to retire in their mind, like, that's it, bodybuilding's done, and they come off, they might find it difficult to dissociate away from that ego, that dopamine driven ego, because their brain chemistry is completely different on TRT or off versus when you were on as a competitor. So there's a lot of unanswered questions that, over time, the brain health side of things towards competitors, especially older competitors, might manifest. And that's sort of where you find people who have developed an ego based on how they look, and being that big bodybuilder with a lot of muscle mass can't step away, because from an ego or pride perspective, people view them as this powerful person, that their whole reality is based on being that muscular person, that without that muscular physique, their ego is blunted, and their purpose, their life's purpose is, well, what do I do now? I was always viewed as, like, for me, example, like Dean, the 250 pound bodybuilder. Now I'm, 190 pounds, and people are like, who are you? Like, you then carry that body as a badge of significance, that people respect you for being that size rather than respecting you for what you achieved during your career, and taking that knowledge and passing it on to someone younger or a bigger audience.
Yeah, you need another
That's something
hobby.
I enjoyed. That's something I really enjoyed talking to AJ Sims about, is, and even Dom Cardoon, as we were discussing identity, and how that's very easy for you to attach your identity to. And I think one thing that's really difficult for us, especially if you haven't been in a place where you've even discussed how important this is, or you've lost everything that you've had, is like building your identity on, you were the person that was able to get there in the first place, and you're the person who had the drive to get there in the first place. You're not the person that is that, right? And at the end of the day, if you've gone there before, then you'll be able to get there again, maybe somewhere else. That might be even better for you now.
Yeah. And like Steve said, hobbies, having something that you can dissociate from bodybuilding towards, whether it's like music in my case, or video games, or building models, or whatever, shooting, archery, nature walks, hikes. You have to have something. You have to have a backup plan, and we've covered it before, that you have to, if you're exiting out of the use of androgens, you have to have not only a backup plan for like your PCT or whatever, you have to have a backup plan for how you're going to, like, that, rearrange your lifestyle or rearrange your life to a new pattern. And that comfort of, like, tracking your food, your meals, your sleep, your training, when you take that away, when you're finished with competitive bodybuilding, it's then figuring out, well, how can I take that discipline or that routine to something else? Because most guys will either be all in and try and transfer those skills to something new, or just be like, all right, I'm finished bodybuilding, and end up just, end up as a bag of shit. And their health, their mental well-being, everything just falls apart because it's like, I can't be bothered anymore from following that lifestyle. Why would I apply that to other areas of my life?
I think if you like, instead of going 100% bodybuilding, you go maybe 50%, enough to maintain it. I still eat healthy. I still do cardio. Do I do posing practice? Hell no. For what? There's nothing left to pose, right? I still go to the gym. So the basics of bodybuilding are still there, but it's like 50% effort, which is enough to maintain, right? And I have my phases where I'm more motivated than other times. But all the extra time that you suddenly have by not doing excessive cardio and not making 7 meals per day fresh, just having 4, it's enough, right? Enough for 220 pounds. It's enough. And not going to the gym for 2 hours. Instead, you go an hour and 15 minutes. You have so much extra time. Business, relationships, kids, pets, motorcycles, cars, whatever your hobby is, right? Making Lego, playing video games. It's like the veil of bodybuilding has been lifted, and you see that there's life to be lived, and then all you have to do is go live it. But some guys, their life was bodybuilding. And again, the comfort of bodybuilding and the repetitiveness and the routine, they can't do it any other way. But again, I think if you switch that dedication to something else, a hobby or a business, you can be very successful there. And the funny thing is, like, even though all of us are kind of retired, and AJ Sims and Dominic Cardone and Justin Compton, and we're kind of retired from our own hardcore bodybuilding phase, we're still involved. Right? We still help people. We still help the community. We still educate. We still coach. All that stuff is still going on. But for most of us, after we kind of semi-retired or fully retired, success came and life opened its doors. And you don't see that when you're a hardcore competitor. That's one of the reasons why I never wanted to do it, because it seems so boring. You know?
I think that's something that's cool, though, that a lot of my audience does have is there's a lot of facets of life that they focus on, and they also have an understanding that they want to optimize their life in multiple areas. So I think that's something that's nice, because I think we've discussed enough on this podcast in the last couple of years that there's other areas to focus on within yourself, and there's also places where there's a lot of places where you want to just mitigate risks, right? Because you have a life to live in the long term. But for a lot of guys who don't really have a life to look forward to, especially like, say, right now, maybe don't have a lot of people in their life, growth is the place where they can shuttle that energy into. And unfortunately, bodybuilding is the easiest, most visible, like, it's almost feels like a easy quantitative measure of how much growth that you're making in the current time. You can literally see it every month as you grow, you know, versus some of these other places that are a little bit more complicated. So what I wanted to attack is I really liked how when you guys were ranking AAS, how, for example, you discussed that some of the 19 NORs, like, you know, NPP, like Nandrolone, for example, is something that you actually set lower than I would have expected. But in the end, also, it kind of makes sense to me, you know, where does this actually benefit somebody long term, aside from like some muscle gains that you could make from other compounds? And I think that's something that I don't hear very often, because you do hear a lot of people in competing, if they're not taking like Primo or Mass along their tests in their off season, they default to something like EQ or Nandrolone, and it's still pretty common. So my goal in this podcast and even in this channel is to slowly shuttle people to understanding that maybe Nick said that, but I think for obviously genetics at the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. Everyone's genetics are different, but there's a different cocktail for everybody, and you don't have to actually take those things, you know? Like,
well, can I defend Nick for a second?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he would let me speak for him. So knowing him,
I also know that we just joke around all the time too.
Yeah,
so.
no, so he was just talking about competing. So he actually uses a lot less gear than definitely less than any pro that I'm aware of. So he's like a very low gear use. People probably don't believe that. He's not abusive at all with stuff. So the Tren thing was more of a like in prep and kind of a joke toward other competitors.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's not like a hardcore, grams and grams gear. So kind of guy, he's truly a freak.
For sure. Bro's fucking nuts, man. The last showing was awesome too.
I completely agree with everything you've said there, Niall, and that. Like that comes back to the whole like 6 weeks out throwing in compound Y or Z. It's every person will find what suits them best towards the benefits, the risks. And, it's probably to the detriment of all the cookie cutter coaches that used to just throw out like the same cycle to 100 clients. Mm-hmm. People are now starting to see that or understand to question when a coach says, okay, well, this is what we're adding in next. People are now taking that information on board and asking the question or creating their own informed consent of, okay, well, I can understand, let's say they were on 300 tests and they've built muscle appreciably and now they've reached sort of a ceiling and they've had to manage E2 to an extent with an aromatase inhibitor is going to like the next jump to 500 test or 450 or whatever. Is that a good choice versus, okay, let's put in a non-aromatizing androgen and escalate dose in that fashion, that the person has the knowledge to say, okay, well, in the past, let's say you're just throwing a cycle, 500 test, 500 primo. Why am I doing that? Whereas now it's sort of, people understand the individuality of building that stack to the person rather than the person fitting the online stack that's thrown around. And that's sort of where, when we were ranking all the different steroids and where we sort of personally put them, we ranked them from both the perspective of like, what's a competitor going to choose and what, again, where lifestyle people, because the division between the two or the blur in the line, it's not as obvious today as it was in the past. So you're trying to deliver the same stratification or classification of the compounds that would suit like someone who wants to gain 10 pounds of muscle to have a better body image versus someone who wants to gain 20 pounds of muscle to be a better competitor. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly where today we're now viewing the education that we're given is allowing people to make a better informed decision. Because if you go back like 10, 15 years ago, I'm always sort of saying it in terms of informed consent. When you look online and someone's talking about a compound and then you go, well, I'm just going to do what they done. Have you truly, gained enough knowledge to create your own informed consent that, okay, I understand the risks, I understand the benefits, and it's my choice alone to use that compound at that dose, not because Steve said he used this dose on his channel. It's that same principle now where it probably makes it a little more difficult for certain coaches to coach people because now they're asking questions like, why did you put that compound in? And
Steve talked about XYZ, and then the coach is like, dude, I have 200 fucking clients. I don't have time to research all these fucking stupid chemicals. Shut the fuck up. That's why I hate my guts.
In the past, it would have been exactly that. It would have been like 500 tests, 200 MPP, and one anadrol, and then the next like 4 weeks, it's like, okay, time to put in 2 anadrols and maybe a half a winstrol. Like it's just pure alchemy of just like making shit up as they went along. Yeah. Now it's, people have that knowledge to create that informed consent where they can sort of say to a coach, yeah, I understand why we're doing that. Or they can ask for a bit of clarification of what's the thought process behind that without insulting the coach, obviously. But it's removing that sort of cookie cutter cycle setup, and one person's cycle might be a certain person's detriment that we're not all just copying one another, what certain people are doing. That you see the individuality that we talked about before with genetics, drug liver metabolism, etc. It's I think, you know, bodybuilding. Can we continue to improve the sport? I think so. I think knowledge, we're still at a point where knowledge is gathering exponentially. But what I will say is, in the last 3 years since we've sort of talked about the mitochondrial optimization and all that aspects, we've seen healthier looking bodybuilders, but we've not seen bigger bodybuilders. So we're starting to see a change in the mindset of like top level elite athletes of managing health correctly versus just exponentially growing. And you see that in the physicality of a lot of competitors, the top level competitors, is that whilst yes, androgens will age your appearance slightly, quite a lot of them don't look as aged as what we've seen in the past. So we are seeing, I guess, that knowledge transfer and people, you know, seeing what's best suited to them rather than what the coach thinks, you know, everyone should take. And that's really important that we continue to give that message.
I think what is happening now with the competitors, they got their contest prep coach and their online coach, which is us. They do their additional research. They get from the educators. They might run it past their coach or not. The coach is like, okay, we have this idea to get you in shape and winning. And if you want to run this extra stuff, just let me know. I probably don't know exactly how it works and how it interacts with the stuff I'm recommending, but at least keep it consistent for me to make the adjustments based on what else we need to do. And again, like Dean emphasized, what we see now is competitors that are fresher, less fatigued, more cognitively present. Instead of before, like in the early 2000s, late 90s, these guys were like not there at all. Just watch the Mr. Olympia press conference. They were babbling and tired. They were smoking cigarettes backstage. And we don't have that stuff going on anymore. You know, all these guys are in a good mood and, you know, energetic. They could stay at the expo all day if they wanted to. And I think that's some of the contributions we've made that these guys have adopted. Whether their coach agrees with it or not. Again, I understand that it's like, for me, if I'm a drug researcher and I don't coach anymore, then I can infinitely produce content on new compounds and how they interact with each other. Whereas I don't expect a coach to keep up with that stuff unless they would be smart enough just to watch a channel. And it's a couple hours a week. Stay up to date easy. Just watch the Anabolic Roundtable once a month. You stay up to date. And some of our podcasts, it's not that much of a time commitment. But then at least I understand what the client would want to run on the side. Again, that's at the highest level for the lifestyle guys. Test primo, GH, done.
Yeah. I think when it comes to competitors, I think the best angle is to trust your coach when it comes to the artistic perspective, trust their eye, especially if that's someone that you're looking towards. And that allows you to take off a little bit of stress, you know, a little bit of decision fatigue off of you, which is really, really important when it comes to the competing space, especially as prep and peak week rolls around. And then for you, have a good understanding of how your genetics are, how your personality is, and most importantly, biofeedback. Because, like you guys have stated before, like if someone say someone's taking a smaller dose of test and a higher dose of EQ, and then his COMT is just fucking through the roof, and I was like not there and everything. Like this is going to affect this is going to affect your look too. You know, not just how you feel. It's going to affect your stress, your look, everything, your sleep.
Yeah, and with all the new fat burners, like some people really overdo them because they want to get shredded, but like all ATX, SLU, mitochondrial stuff, it also increases your carbohydrate requirement because you kind of burn through pyruvate and your body temperature goes up, and that can affect your look and your caloric intake as well. So if you decide to take that stuff based on a video I made or something we discussed in the Anabolic Roundtable, and you don't tell your coach, then the coach is going to be like, why is this guy also fucking flat? Right? He's confused because you're actually speeding up your metabolism without telling them, and they might not understand that it's not a thyroid thing or a beta-2 adrenergic thing. It's a mitochondrial thing, and it requires a different strategy, right? So The sport is evolving very, very fast, and it can be hard to I'm getting stuff sent every single month of new stuff to try, and it's hard to keep up to date.
Speaking of mitochondrial and new stuff, ATX, I feel like a lot of people just default to saying that they believe AMPK to be like anti-anabolic or to be catabolic. But I know you were also stating before about like if you want to preserve your muscle, I feel like a lot of this could be prevented just purely through nutrition, even if AMPK is turned on, though. No.
Yeah. So ATX 304 is a pan AMPK activator. So it really downregulates mTOR. And when I was using it, I was noticing that I was recovering less and that my skeletal muscle fullness was lower, but that's also through the increase of glycogen utilization. So by increasing the carbohydrates, I was able to sustain some fullness, but the progression was not as good as I would expect on a certain dose of steroids until I took it out. And then I started progressing again. So on BAM 15, which causes a lot of oxidative stress, it's not something I would recommend. Then fullness actually returned. And recovery and strength increased. But body temperature also went up. And I felt sick because it's a more potent uncoupler. So, and then of course there's DNP, which, well, let's not go there. So for lifestyle clients that don't want to burn or don't want to gain any more muscle mass, they're happy with their body composition, besides the fat, obviously, yes, I would lean more towards ATX. If muscularity is more of an issue to you, I would lean more towards BAM 15, but then you shouldn't combine it with SLU because that creates a lot of oxidative stress, obviously. You have upregulated mitochondria and a very potent uncoupler. And you also require more antioxidants. So certain things you can combine and certain things you can't. And then it really depends on your goal, which of these compounds you want to utilize. And both of them, if you utilize them correctly, it's almost illegal how much fat loss you have. It's really insane. It's the most dramatic fat loss I've ever had in my life.
Do you have any ways to avoid the exhaustion on ATX?
Yeah, so you have to combine it with SLU. And since it's not a very potent uncoupler, technically it should be possible. But since BAM 15 is a potent uncoupler, I wouldn't combine those two together. But with BAM 15, you'll still be lethargic.
I did experiment with ATX and SLU, but I was still exhausted.
How much ATX did you take?
It was one pill.
2 capsules.
It was one capsule from the guy that you sent me.
Yeah, so that's 50 milligrams. That's not much. Yeah, I took 100 milligrams. 200 milligrams is way too much, obviously.
Goddamn.
Somebody has to figure out a higher truth, man. So 50 milligrams SLU, 50 milligrams ATX morning and evening. The fat loss was illegal. And that's with injectable caloric. Yeah, really, Kurt. You wake up and you're like, what the fuck? And that's after a cheat meal, you know? And then the next day you're like, huh? And the next day again, this can't be good. I did my blood work and it was all in range. But that was like one of those compounds where you feel it's so potent that you must be melting something on the inside. And my risk tolerance is pretty high, you know. But when I saw the fat loss, I'm like, you know, I'm probably killing myself, you know. So I stopped. Yeah. I
mean, it's kind of got the weird mechanism, right? It's like poking holes in to like leak ATP out.
Yeah, so it uncouples slightly, but it also optimizes mitochondrial function. And technically, if you combine it with SS31 and a good amount of antioxidants, it should be relatively safe. But this polypharmacy has never been investigated. And it's the same as running like a high-dose Tren. It's the body composition changes are so fast that you know that you're damaging something. It's like it's the same with like putting a 4 turbos in your engine and then throwing the nitrous at it. You know you're wearing that shit down, right? Yeah. But it's still fun. It's still fun to do it on the track, right? So, and this felt exactly the same. It's like this is so dramatic. It must come at a cost. So for short periods of time when you need to get lean fast, I get it. Okay. Sustainable? Hell fucking no. And I'm probably the most highest risk taker of this panel. Kurt is laughing his ass off, right? I still look good. Kidneys are not melting. But yeah, that's at that point I was like, you know what? This is probably too good to be true. So I figured out something would I recommend it for a short period? Sure. But I know that what people are going to do, they're going to go to the hotel buffet or the cruise where they eat like pigs and then run SLU and ATX not to get fat. Right. And then, you wouldn't be visiting the sauna. That's for sure.
I think some of them got that idea from you, though.
Yeah. I'm a terrible example. I'm not the influencer people should be following, but people do. I think everybody has like a hidden drug addict inside of them, and that's why they find my channel.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is bodybuilding, really.
Yeah. Like I think Dean is the least risky guy out of there. And so our this panel is putting, we are a nicely balanced panel. Let's put it that way.
I'm still intrigued. I mean, I've done my fair share of experiments, like I've said in the past, and the obviously with stepping away from bodybuilding, I still follow like things like ATX and all these sort of new compounds that are coming, but my days of doing what Steve is now still doing are well and truly gone, because I'm not thinking about like what am I to gain from doing it other than being able to put it out there as an educational setting.
Yeah. I'm getting like as soon as I see a red flag, I abort. I don't want to persist through it anymore like I used to. Like, I got to get the data and the before and after pictures. And like, if I see a red flag, I'm done.
Kurt, since you only have about 15 minutes left, do you mind if I ask you, is there anything else that comes to your mind other than the 19 NORs that you might slightly regret or you just wouldn't touch personally, even as a competitor, you would at least try to minimize use?
I think Kurt regrets the most not starting at 25 years old.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Because who knows?
Maybe you could have been a fantastic 212 competitor.
I might have been.
Yeah.
I see open bodybuilder. 5'7" with TRT. So
yeah, I mean, when I saw you to the Olympia like 2 years ago,
I was like almost 240 then.
Yeah, you were full as a house.
Things I would avoid. Honestly, I'd avoid insulin. I know that's probably not a popular thing to say, but it's the one thing you could do. You do it wrong once, it'll kill you.
Yeah.
And for most guys, it's just not needed unless you really need to eat that much food that your pancreas can't keep up. And I see that as a trend in the open guys. A lot of them are getting away from that.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, like anything else, I guess it can be used appropriately. Just something I would caution. I just don't think it's a need for most guys.
Okay.
No, I agree. And I used to be a big fan of insulin, but nowadays I think it's one of those last things. And then even then you don't need it daily, maybe on a high day or a carb load or whatever.
I've only put 3 guys in the last 4 years on insulin, and it was just for a brief point where their A1C was trending up. And in order to make more progress, we need to keep eating. So it was just really the only thing to keep their health in check. But then I'm starting super conservative with it, and I'm watching, and I make them send me blood sugar readings. Outside of that, no, not. I mean, I don't think this stuff's inherently super risky. I think dose, duration, and your pre-existing mental state is going to dictate a lot of these things, right? Like a lot of guys get into bodybuilding with all sorts of baggage in the background, and it's just going to bring that shit out,
Yeah.
I think the best thing people can learn is patience, because it just takes time. And what you see in this new generation, like these 19-year-olds, 23-year-olds are sauced to the gills. They're just burning the candle from all angles with a blowtorch.
Yeah, they'll be dead by the time they're my age.
Yeah.
And you don't appreciate it until you get older anyway. I hope that I have 25 years left on this planet, but that's maybe.
Those aren't the listeners on this podcast, though. I'll tell you that.
I know. I met them at the Arnold
those aren't the
Classic, and I
listeners
was
of the podcast,
honestly
though. So
a little bit upset. I'm like, what are you guys doing?
Going off of what you were saying before I fucking forget what I was going to say.
Insulin.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed as I've talked to some clients and some coaches off air is the substantial and like surprising to me genetic variance in someone's blood sugar response to using GH versus before they ever used it. I know one person, for example, started his first cycle of GH. I think it was only 3 or 4 IUs. And in his off season, where he never had issues before, his fasting blood sugar rose to 108.
So I wouldn't use fasting blood sugar as a metric for anything. So we're taught to not,
Just
we don't
fasting
even really look
insulin?
at it. I only, A1C. I only look at fasting glucose in people that are diabetic that have to manage their blood sugar, because you're going to dawn effect, right? We all eat so much so often. It's never going to really be, rarely is it super low. I'm just looking at A1C. I don't really care what people's fasting glucose is. I try to avoid now. I think while I love that bodybuilding is getting healthier, I don't love orthorexia. It's not the right word, but the hyper focus on all of these things that people do all day, thinking that it's making them healthier, right? They track everything, and it's a little obsessive. Like, again, it goes with being an addict. Is like, how many steps, how many this, how much salt, like everything is like micromanaged, like checking your blood sugar, wearing a monitor, like all this craziness that does, like, I'm not a process person. I'm a results person. Like, what's actually occurring? Doing all this shit all day long is not getting you anywhere.
I think what you said, Kurt, with fasting blood glucose, there is too many variables that interfere with that measurement. But what I would say is, if someone's fasting blood glucose with the introduction of GH has gone up quite significantly, you'd then want to do like data verification postprandial after they've eaten meals to see what has changed. And normally that fasting blood glucose effect is a consequence of lipolysis, of releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream and interfering with the insulin receptor. But in saying that, if someone's fasting blood glucose shoots up and then postprandial, we're not seeing the historical, like maybe you say it was 90 or 85, the fasting glucose level. If we don't see that return, well, then we can probably assume, or you could use a CGM to track that A1C is going to start trending up, because the insulin receptor throughout the day isn't as functional as it should be. And so you're sticking, or you're glycating the red blood cells with glucose. But in saying that, there's a lot of variables that play into insulin sensitivity when GH is being used outside of lipolysis. There could be changes to internal metabolic health from fluid retention causing, let's say, sleep apnea. And the person now is chronically snoring and mouth breathing, which is now causing dehydration. And now that dehydration is causing elevated blood sugar. So the person checks their fasting blood glucose, but they've missed out on a critical step of actually hydrating upon wake before checking the fasting measurement. And now, like what Kurt has said, you're seeing a dawn effect, or you're seeing dehydration from the night before from snoring or mouth breathing. That really, if someone is tracking fasting blood glucose, you have to be hydrated. And that means electrolytes and fluids. You have to be in a position where you're allowing that hydration to take effect. So you wake up, you hydrate, you wait about 30 minutes, and then check your fasting blood glucose. Most people roll out of bed. First thing they do is check their fasting blood glucose and then start eating their first meal, and then shower and get their teeth brushed and everything else. When I was coaching people, one of the first things I always said to people was, you wake up, if we're tracking blood pressure, a couple of times per week, sit at the edge of your bed for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, nice, steady nasal breathing, get yourself awake. Again, you're trying to remove any sort of cortisol awakening response under blood pressure reading. Take the blood pressure reading, have their hydration requirements beside them in the room, like a bottle of water, electrolytes, hydrate, then spend the next 20 minutes either getting washed, brushing your teeth, like do everything, small level of activity to allow what you've drank to hydrate your body. Check your blood glucose at that point. If the first reading isn't correct, take it again. But similarly, a lot of people don't know how to take blood glucose correctly in terms of like the correct sterile technique to the finger. making sure that, the first drop of blood that comes out, that you wipe that away and get a new set of blood to the surface of the skin to take the measurement with, having the machine calibrated. There's loads of things involved in it, but when this trend came out of let's all check our fasting blood glucose, there's all little nuanced steps to it that people were then panicking when their blood glucose was 100. And, I've as a highlight from whatever 6 or 7 years ago on Instagram showing this is my fasting blood glucose after waking up, after having like a high carb day, or even with competitions carbing up the day before. You wake up the next morning, your blood glucose is at 6 or whatever, 102 or whatever it is in US terms exactly. I have my pint of water with some electrolytes in it, drink it, and then wait 30 minutes and recheck my fasting blood glucose, and all of a sudden it's back at 85. And it's like, that's you waking up dehydrated, and you need sodium and fluid to manage the glucose in your bloodstream. That there's a lot of things that play into that one measurement rather than going, it's the GH that's caused the high fasting blood glucose.
Yeah, and then you have the blunting of cortisol at night, and then maybe a overcompensatory cortisol release when you wake up, right? And whether that's to the alarm clock, or you're like, oh shit, I gotta check my blood glucose levels. And then you get this cortisol dump, your liver glycogen gets dumped, right? And then your blood glucose levels goes up because of that. It's like because you're actually stressed out of your mind that you have to take these readings. I got to do it first thing in the morning, bro. The thyroid conversion that changes, maybe your free thyroid or your thyroid binding globulin levels are super low because you're in high dose steroids, and now you throw in the growth hormone. It starts converting all this T4 into T3, which can alter your blood glucose levels in a fasted state because you get a lot of gluconeogenesis in the morning because your liver glycogen is depleted overnight, and thus your blood glucose levels goes up. There's so many things that go play into it. I think most people that live the lifestyle, eat good, do some cardio, maybe take a little bit of carnitine to help with the fatty acids that are being liberated from growth hormone, they should not run into issues. They should not run into issues. I know a guy that lived a lifestyle that take 18 IUs of growth hormone, and their insulin sensitivity is fine. Fasting glucose levels are perfectly low in the morning. Hemoglobin A1C in range, and they're slamming 1,000 carbohydrates every single day. I think the guys that worry the most are the ones that run into the most side effects. But when you live the lifestyle, you have nothing to worry about because you're doing everything right to sustain your health.
I feel like that can happen often more with people who are neurodivergent, though. Then you have to attack it at a different angle.
Yeah, that's like one point over 100, and then they're like stressed, and then next time it's 110 because of the cortisol release, self-induced.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like the backstage guy, right? That's almost in shape, but he's 99%. He's not happy with how he looks, and he looks in the mirror. I'm not there yet. And you get a cortisol dump, and then he looks 70%, like he never dieted at all. He just sabotaged his own peak. I've seen it happen so many times. Backstage, they just sabotage themselves, and that's what's happening a lot with these guys that are kind of new to this. They think they know, they have this knowledge presented to them, but they didn't really do additional research, and they sabotage their own bodybuilding with these kinds of nuances. When in reality, if you just put in the work, man, I like what Kurt says, just go with the results. Chill the fuck out. Trust in the process. It's going to end up okay.
So I think education and consciousness of these things is very important, but then again, it's not law. Like as long as you have a consciousness of what's going on,
experience will overrule everything.
Yeah.
But you need to get your hands dirty to get the experience. You can learn as much as you want, but without the experience, it's all useless.
Yeah. Speaking of water and electrolytes, I was just reaching for mine and realized I didn't have it with me. So it's been 2 hours and I haven't drank anything.
I'm halfway
Thanks,
through.
Dean. God damn it. Everyone's fucking picking up their water bottles.
It's so funny. Remember the last podcast we did? I was talking about hydration, right? And say you need electrolytes for hydration. All these people, they don't understand that food has electrolytes. Like you can salt your meals. No, you need liquid electrolytes with glucose in there in the drink. Prime energy is what you need. No, motherfucker. You can have salt in your meals. You can have a pickle. you can have some sauerkraut on your meals. Good for digestion. Yeah, we'll discuss that tomorrow. So,
Kurt, do you happen to have any extra time on just really quick explaining the differences in growth hormone between men and women? The only thing I'm aware of is that maybe it hits women a little bit harder. Like,
I can make it really simple.
Dose.
So estrogen, I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. So estrogen is a sex hormone. It's not an anabolic hormone. Its function is largely one of a negative growth regulator. So estrogen's role when it comes to anabolism is one of controlling growth in a negative fashion. So you have to understand that just because women have different sex organs than men, the rest of our organs generally function the same. They're identical, and our body responds the same way to these hormones. What estrogen's role? So when you look at a female during ovulation, estrogen goes up. What occurs when estrogen reaches its peak is thyroid hormone goes down, blood glucose goes up, sex hormone binding globulin goes up, binding proteins for IGF go up. That's to free up energy for conception and protect the mother from getting too muscular so she can conceive and she doesn't need even more energy to power herself through the day so she can grow a child. The same thing happens during pregnancy. As estrogen rises, sex hormone binding globulin goes up to protect her from testosterone. The liver then releases binding proteins for IGF, which takes that IGF away from the muscle and puts it in the serum and either renders it useless or directs it to other tissues so she's not growing and so the fetus is not exposed to IGF. Fetus is exposed to IGF-2 from the placenta. If a fetus is exposed to IGF-1 from the mother, it will become too large to fit out of the birth canal. Right? So, so the difference then is exactly there. What happens, because females tend to have typically higher estrogen, or at least during 3 parts of the 3 weeks out of the month than a man, is most of the IGF response. So IGF is responsible for 70 to 80% of the responses from growth hormone. So the IGF response that we all rely on when we inject growth hormone, a female is not going to benefit from that aspect of it because hers is bound, right? And you'll see this, and I think this is where the misconception, bodybuilders, they're on a cycle, a high aromatizing cycle, and they go get their blood work, and their IGF's of 500, and they're like, wow, I'm super anabolic. No, you're not. That IGF is pulled away from your muscle. You can't see the IGF that's acting, that splice variant that's actually growing muscles inside your muscle. So you can't test that unless you do a biopsy. What IGF serum test is not a test designed for athletes. It's falsely used by doctors who don't understand it. You really just want it in range. What we use it medically for is to find either acromegaly, giantism, or a liver disorder where the liver is not producing IGF in response to growth hormone. And that's where drugs like Increlux come in. You get a child who has growth hormone, but their liver doesn't produce IGF. So then you give them Increlux so they can continue to grow at an appropriate rate. Right? That test is not designed for us. It doesn't matter what your serum IGF is, right? As long as it's in range, who the hell cares what it is? It's not telling you anything about your physique. If you want to know if your growth hormone's working, look in the mirror. Growth hormone's a addict drug. No, I hate to say this because guys take true. And they're like, I can't tell if it's working. Well, then it's not working. Sorry, dipshit, it's not working because look in the mirror. When it works, it works. You should look fuller. You should be bigger. You should be sleeping like a fucking baby with weird ass dreams. And you should be getting leaner, right? Your pants should be falling off of you while you're growing. That's how growth hormone works. If it's not doing those things, like your shoulders aren't getting bigger and capped, it's not working. And it doesn't mean taking more necessarily is going to do it, because if your growth hormone is garbage, taking more ain't going to do anything. But that's really the difference. So women don't get an IGF response from GH the same way that you and I get. So what happens is if you go over a certain amount with women, they tend to just get sides. They get joint pain. They get all sorts of stuff. Because
they get super lean in the face.
They get, like, I had my wife on 1 milligram of Serostim for a year to help fix her knees. We went above that amount. All of a sudden she would get crazy edema in places in pain. It just doesn't have the same response. Yeah. So the only time it's ever used in a larger amount in women is with HIV. But again, you're talking about someone who's dying. So, and the side effects there are still prevalent. There's really no other choice. But
the sweet spot for most women seems to be like 2 IUs. Yeah. It's almost one.
Women in HIV, they're not getting milligrams anyway, unless they're over 140 pounds, which most HIV patients are not over 140 pounds. So they're getting 4 milligrams or a slightly lower dose than that anyway. So they're not getting the same dose as a man. So like for a woman, 2 IUs is probably plenty for most women, maybe 3 if they tolerate it. They don't need a ton. 5-6 units, not going to do necessarily much for most women, except give them sides.
Okay.
For a man, that's really, you're just cracking the surface there for usage, right? Most men, unless you're a super hyper responder to it, I don't know most men that are getting a whole shitload out of 2 IUs or 3 IUs of GH, unless you're 70 years old.
Better skin. That's about it.
Yeah. Fingernails.
Yeah.
But so that's where the difference is. Estrogen's the difference.
Mm-hmm. There's a good explanation for why, checking your blood work for the IGF-1 levels isn't really a dictate.
No, look, Chase Irons, when Chase was on a bottle a day of Serostim, he was doing blood work all the time, and his IGF in serum was like 170, 200.
170, 180.
It's an irrelevant number, right? And I've seen plenty of people clinically that have IGFs of 1,100, 2,000. These guys aren't muscular. They have gigantic shaped heads, huge foreheads, huge jaws, monstrous hands, right? Wrinkles in the back of their head. They have acromegaly. They're not growing like you think. It's directing IGF to all sorts of other places that you don't want it.
And you see it vice versa with the Increlex injections or IGF-1 LR3. It barely budges your blood work. But if you inject it in the same muscle over and over and over again, you bet your ass that muscle is going to grow because you get a localized effect.
That goes back to the binding proteins. Increlux is not bound. Increlux is pure IGF, so it's able to go where it needs to go. Versus DES and the LR3 are they come bound. It's almost a flaw by design. It's like, why would you design it to be bound to binding protein 3? You're basically rendering it useless.
No, I think that they're designed in a way that they bind to it less.
Oh,
and increase the half-life.
I think it's just not as effective as Increlux. It's why they're not prescription drugs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got a lot more bang for my buck at the Increlex than the IGF-1 LR3. That's for sure. And it's cheaper milligram for milligram anyway. But the bottle is 40 milligrams. So people are like, oh, it's $700. Yeah, but calculate it to the milligram. And then you see that it's like $17, It's way more affordable than IGF-1 LR3. It's $40, $50, unless you get it from China.
From an anabolism point of view, you have to understand estrogen's real role there is not even any tissue creation. It does do red blood cells and hematocrit. It will cause that, same as a woman, right? So during ovulation, red blood cell mass goes up. She has her period. She gets rid of those extra red blood cells. Same as a man. From the reason why testosterone tends to cause hematocrit issues and stuff is not testosterone. It's the estrogen. Primobolan, Trenbolone, they don't cause red blood cell issues, right? That's one of the reasons why Parabolan was prescribed, because at a super low dose, right, 50 milligrams of pure base every 10 days caused bone mass increase without hematocrit increases. When they tried that with testosterone, it took like 600 milligrams a test to get the same amount of bone growth. But then people had all sorts of blood issues, right? And women can't take that. They were growing beards versus on, an amp of Powerball every 10 days weren't causing androgenic sides in men or women, right? So again, it goes, the aromatization is what caused a lot of the issues, not so much the pure drug. And also from a collagen point of view, that's not estrogen either. That's an anabolic thing. The steroids that cause the most collagen production, the ones that don't aromatize, right? Anavar, Winstrol, Primobolan. The testosterone causes some, but it's not nearly as strong for collagen production, right? EQ causes collagen production. None of those drugs aromatize to any notable degree. I think that the problem in bodybuilding is everyone is so backwards about estrogen that they're literally spinning their wheels in circles. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so that question actually comes up pretty often. So for someone who tends to have hematocrit being raised pretty regularly, where getting a phlebotomy obviously isn't very valid because it has to be a little bit too.
Do you want me to explain when a phlebotomy makes sense and what the parameters are?
No, I was going to ask, would you just recommend that they modulate their estrogen and maybe reduce it potentially if the speed of which their hematocrit increases is too fast? Yeah,
estrogen should always be kept in range, right? I mean, it's fine if it's a point or two above, but it needs to be roughly in that range regardless of what's going on. It's not anabolic. You want to, that would be the first thing, hydration. And hydration starts the day before. You see this in the ER. Patient will go in for surgery, and even if you put fluid in them, their red blood cell count's skewed in the morning. You don't see an increase you don't see it appropriately until the afternoon. So like a lot of times, if you want to see your red blood cell count in a more appropriate fashion, go get blood work in the middle of the day. It doesn't matter if you're fasted. Just go get it in the middle of the day and your red blood cell count should be fixed because now you've had like a gallon of fluid that's had time to dilute your blood appropriately, right? But when you look at phlebotomy, the things you want to look at are ferritin, platelets, hematocrit, and hemoglobin. Just because hematocrit and hemoglobin are elevated doesn't mean you need phlebotomy. Unless there's obvious side effects like you're beet red. Platelets are what cause aggregation of cells. That's what causes the thickness that's going to cause a stroke risk. And ferritin, if it's too high, it oxidizes just like iron does outside, and it can actually destroy your organs. But that's a long-term effect. Just because your hemoglobin and hematocrit are like a point over the range does not warrant giving blood, especially if ferritin is in the middle of the low end of the range, because you're just making yourself anemic by giving blood all the time. Doctors a lot of times casually forget this because they're just trying to avoid liability. So you'll go in there and be like, oh, you got to give blood. Right? They know better than that. They're just doing that to protect their own ass. Right? Especially if they know you're on steroids, because they're worried you're going to do dumb shit and hurt yourself. They just don't want to be liable for it.
Okay. And there's so many methods to bring all these markers back down.
Yes. Don't snore. Be hydrated. Right? Like sleep, like Dean said, like all these things like naturally kind of fix this stuff, but it's not necessarily like just an androgen driven process. It's, androgens do drive it to some degree, but estrogen's going to drive it more.
Yeah, honestly, sleep apnea makes it a lot worse.
I have seen quite recently, not a coincidence, because again, when you delve into it, but when people do have hematocrit problems and they didn't have them previously, as you get older, your genomic response towards HFE and your retention of iron, or the action of hepcidin working to break down iron, can change. So while someone who's in their 20s could probably take a load of gear and never see their hematocrit change, as they get into their 30s and 40s, you can see this genomic shift where hepcidin production actually starts to downregulate, and now they're accumulating more iron. So I've had about 4 consults in the last year where this change is just switched on for some guys. And some of them have been competitors in their 20s who left the sport and came back again. And now, unfortunately, some of them can't use any more than TRT because the hepcidin action isn't there anymore. So the iron is accumulating. You can do phlebotomies, but the ironic thing is the action of a phlebotomy, removing a pint of blood, will lower hematocrit by about 7%, 7-8% is what the calculation works out at. That change in fluid volume from removing that pint of blood actually stimulates the kidneys to make more EPO. And so over time, you get a short-term change where hematocrit drops, but come 10 weeks later, your hematocrit is probably even higher than before. And guys are then chasing phlebotomy after phlebotomy, and they're never really willing to accept, well, the reason why you have the problem, let's say sleep apnea and everything else is ruled out, is because your genetics have changed and now hepcidin isn't working. And then you could use chelators. You have prescription-based chelators, or you have IP6, which is basically phytic acid, the anti-nutrient thing that people talk about in nuts and seeds, that chelates iron. But if you take IP6 as a supplement, IP6 will chelate zinc, copper, magnesium, iron as well. So it's not just selective towards iron.
No, same as with EDTA disodium chelate. It will also take all the minerals out. And then you have DADA that also acts as a chelator, but it's not very potent. And so just to interject real quick about the donations. If you do a power red donation, which returns the plasma, you get less of an erythropoietic response, but it still can occur. Or you have to do the micro donations of 100 milliliters every week. This is helping the cyclists.
Yeah, the isovolemic of literally when they take out a pint of blood, they put a pint of saline in, and that temporarily will offset the change in blood volume that would stimulate EPO production. But similarly, again, you've still reduced your red blood cell count, where you will see
you still get an erythropoietic response, but it's significantly less if you return plasma, or whether that's saline or power red donation. And again, you can do the micro donations, the 100 milliliters every couple of days, but that's like threading it,
Okay.
And then you have enalapril, and telmisartan, methylene blue, nattokinase, serrapeptase, lumbrokinase. Right? There's so many supplements you can take to bring your hematocrit and platelets back in range. Even pentosan is able to lower your platelet count.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other
It's
important thing to flag here is don't be so focused on hematocrit and platelet count alone. If you've never checked your clotting factors, like your Leyden factor or your prothrombin or your INR, like all these markers of how quickly you clot, you could have normal hematocrit, normal platelets, but your INR or your prothrombin time is really fast. It doesn't matter that hematocrit and platelets are in control. The ability for your body to form a clot is extremely fast. And if there's any like micro trauma or arterial shearing or whatever can generate a clot in the body, whatever you want to view it, that clot generation could be extremely quick. And all you need is for one clot to occur, for the platelets to respond, and for it to not have an appropriate fibrinolytic response to dissolve that clot. And that clot reaches your heart or reaches like your brain for cerebral vascular stroke. The most important thing that people should do if they're embarking down this with their baseline bloods, understand your clotting risk away from just platelets alone. With synthetic estrogens.
And smoking.
Sorry, Kurt, what did you say?
With smoking, it is.
Smoking, yeah. I think from the historical synthetic estrogens and progestins, that was where some of the data surrounding like offsetting female HRT came from. With bioidentical estradiol or bioidentical progesterone, progesterone's anti-inflammatory as one side of how it acts in the body. That if you're taking the bioidentical forms, if estradiol caused clotting, then all the guys that are allowing their estrogen to run rampant for anabolism would be all having clots and strokes all over the place. So I think it's the synthetic versions like the ethinyl estradiol and the things that were used primarily as contraception to interfere with natural hormone synthesis and levels, where you see some of that clotting offset. But from a bioidentical perspective, our own natural hormones don't seem to have that effect, to my knowledge anyway.
No, when you run the synthetic estrogen through the liver, it's going to be worse.
Yeah.
I need to run.
Yeah,
sure.
Get to.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll see you guys.
Thanks for coming on, man. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, I'll ask you about Anadrol and Tren another day. See you guys. A few of you have asked where I get my pharma grade Anavar and IGF-1, and of course it's not through Vinny in the parking lot. It's Optimize HP, prescribed in through a doctor. And the reason why I helped start this clinic instead of joining an established clinic like Merrick is because I wanted a real say in how our clients are taken care of. And the honest truth, it also helps me make a living, but I couldn't do it through selling snake oil. Here's the honest truth, is in a sport where everybody takes it, stops being cheating. The game just changes. Now instead, it's about who uses it smarter. But your health is part of the scoreboard. You know, we go back and forth between pharma versus gray market here. And while it does help you travel, I really don't have the answer. That's your call. However, every bodybuilder should be getting quarterly blood work. Yes, even you, the guy who says he feels fine. So we built the membership around that. The bloods are free, and the membership is just what we call the discount. My accountant hates this next part. DMs are free, always. Link is in the description. Sign up with code Nile. Send me a DM on Instagram. I got you personally. There's a lot I definitely wanted to ask you guys about, but maybe we could talk about it another day. We'll jump to the Q&A real quick.
You can ask me anything, man. I'm always an open book for you.
I also wanted to discuss y'all's perception on the sweet spot that I've discussed on this podcast a lot of times before too, but I think we could just talk about that another time.
Sure. Sweet spot when it comes to women? I've been looking for it, but after 10 years of marriage,
That's crazy talk, bro.
Gotta put some dad jokes in there.
Real Viking Poppy says, damn, what a freaking awesome lineup.
Where's the question?
Where's the question?
Did you get a lot of questions in? I got a lot of questions in. And then
there's a lot of questions, which isn't going to be fit in 20 minutes, but we'll try our best.
Well, get the best ones.
Coach Conby asks, how do you guys, how they see the future of administering gear for non-prescription folks, most people?
You mean different routes of injections or different routes of administration?
I think more so dosing frequency. A lot. I think we probably already know the answer to this because we've been talking about daily administrations of injections for a long, long time, yet standard prescriptions are still once or maybe twice a week. And this comes back to patient compliance. So if you think about, you've got someone new who's like, let's say you've got just some general population person who's gone into a TRT clinic and they qualify for TRT and they're like, 39, have no real experience with any injections in their life and all that sort of stuff. And they would prefer to administer it themselves rather than going in once or twice per week or once every 2 weeks for an injection. Imagine a prescribing doctor telling the person, well, I want you to inject 0.1 of a mil Monday to Sunday, and you have to do it every day. And for those who understand the logic of doing it every day, they might see the stable level benefit from it. But to the person who sees other people doing it once per week, it's sort of like, well, I'd just rather do it once per week than have the effort of having to do a daily injection. So it comes down to compliance of how likely is it for the person to follow their prescription and see the benefit overall than get to a point where they do one 10 milligram shot and then the rest of the week they just can't be arsed doing the other 6. So, and this is where sometimes in clinical trials, giving a drug every single day might not be warranted based on the half-life of the drug, but they designed the dosing protocol to meet patient compliance. Same way like with AIs. Exemestane has a terminal half-life of about, if we want to really push it out, about 4 days. But imagine telling someone, I want you to take a quarter of an exemestane on a Monday and a quarter on a Thursday. It's very difficult for that person to sort of remember the exactness of like a Monday and a Thursday or every 4 days. So certain drugs are designed that you just take it every day. So the doctor knows, okay, the person's more likely to take that dose at the same time every single day when it's an oral tablet. An injection's a little bit more invasive. So quite often they just default to what's the most likely thing. Once per week, person's more likely to keep up with the treatment. Same with GLPs.
Yeah, exactly. That's how they were designed. Once a week injections.
Once per week injection. Now the oral based GLPs, like semaglutide and orforglipron, you have to swallow that every single day. And even then, when we sort of view what's the compliance of someone taking an oral capsule versus a single injection once per week, you probably will remember to do an injection once per week if you like mark it in your phone as a reminder, or you know that every Monday or Sunday you do the injection, versus taking a tablet every day as well has compliance issues as well. So it always comes down to what's the person most likely to adhere to. And that's why I don't think you're ever going to see clinics vie for like the most stable dosing strategy that might be everyday injections. It's what's that person going to follow.
Gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense. Very aligned with the medical community. As far as the GLPs go, since you mentioned them, does Tirzepatide, for example, have less of like an importance when it comes to maintaining just a single week injection than something like Retatrutide? Because I was under the impression that Retatrutide, the reason why doing something like microdoses or like multiple weekly injections is how much that affects the effect of glucagon.
So I spoke about this before when there's the whole argument about once per week versus micro daily injections. And to be honest, when you look at the half-life of the drug, you end up at the same position. Same way as like if you do one injection of tests in ante per week at like say 70 milligrams versus 10 milligrams daily, you end up at the same stable plasma level after 5 or 6 weeks. But in terms of the side effects that might come from it, a bigger dose, so 70 milligrams of testosterone is going to create a much higher peak, which could then cause more aromatization the next day, 24 hours after the peak is reached. Mm-hmm. And similarly, with a GLP, you take a massive bolus dose of 2.5 milligrams, say, of Tirzepatide, you are flooding the body in terms of the GLP receptor agonism, which is where the appetite suppression comes from, because it's an adverse side effect. So you think about that the appetite suppression with a GLP-1 isn't actually the effect you're taking the drug initially designed for.
It's diabetic medications. They're insulin secretagogues.
Yeah. So
what we're taking it for now is the side effect. And it's very easy. So people go with the clinical dose, right? Of 4 milligrams Retatrutide once per week, 8 milligrams, 12 milligrams. What they should then also read is the side effects in these clinical trials. Nausea, motion sickness, car sickness, gastrointestinal upset, diarrhea, vomiting, all the shit you don't want. You want this for appetite suppression. So during BioBros years ago, when liraglutide, dulaglutide, semaglutide came to the market, we discussed like, hey, instead of doing this one injection of 2 milligrams semaglutide, 1 milligram semaglutide once per week, why do we do half a milligram 3 times a week? Just like liraglutide, that's every single day. Nobody has appetite issues or nausea issues on liraglutide because it's a 0.6 to 1.2 milligrams daily injection. And you can skip it on Sunday and still eat, still enjoy your food. And this is the reasons why, educators like us say, okay, you want the benefits, right? You want maybe insulin secretion, you want fat loss, you want appetite suppression, but you want none of the side effects. Dose it a little bit more often. And for some people, that's twice a week. Some people, that's every other day. Sometimes it's 3 times a week or every single day, right? Depending on the drug and their tolerance. And some people get away with once a week, and especially with the Retatrutide, because it seems that drug was specifically designed to build up a tolerance real fast. So Tirzepatide, most people top out at 3 milligrams a week. Retatrutide, you start with 3. Then you go to 4, you go to 5, you go to 7, you go to 10, 12.
Go to 16.
Right? A lot of people end up at the maximum dose of Retatrutide because it's not a very good appetite suppressant drug, but it's great to help with fat loss through the glucocorticoid or the glucagon receptor agonism. Mm-hmm. So this is the only one that people really need to ramp up the dose with. And then after they ramp up the dose to 10, 12 milligrams, the side effects are no longer there, and they need to go to once per week administration to continue to blunt their appetite. That's the fault of the drug. You build up a tolerance real fast. So I'm on 10 milligrams Reta right now. If I switch to Tirzepatide, I'd probably use less.
The GLP-1 receptor internalizes as well, like the insulin receptor. And also, like what I was talking about, when you do a once per week injection of, say, 2.5 milligrams Tirzepatide, the clinical trials were done in metabolically obese people who weren't a bodybuilder. A bodybuilder should have good insulin sensitivity, low body fat, all the hallmarks of what aren't present in the clinical trial population. So if this drug's main mechanism is to potentiate natural insulin secretion, 2.5 milligrams could be a huge dose for that person that creates negative adverse side effects. They'll get massive appetite suppression, but they're going to feel very, very sick. And actually, they probably won't even want to tolerate the sight of food or drink. If we then suggest, okay, well, we know that the drug's half-life is about 7 days. If we went 1 milligram, like Monday, 1 milligram Thursday, or whatever way you want to split up, 1.25, it's a smaller dose, so it's a lower receptor activation threshold, but it's still probably enough receptor activation to see the appetite suppression effects without the adverse events of like intestinal paralysis, the thyroid dysfunction, etc. So when people are arguing like 3 milligrams of Retatrutide versus 1 milligram 3 times per week or every other day, or whatever you wanted to do it, both camps were correct, but it's sort of like the clinical data is in obese people once per week, which again is a patient compliance perspective. Like part of Tirzepatide and Retatrutide is this big linkage spacer on the molecule, which is designed to allow the drug to stay in circulation for 7 to 10 days. So if you're someone who's not a bodybuilder, you might default into one click of a pen into your stomach on a Sunday morning and forget about it. But for a bodybuilder who has good insulin sensitivity, good fat oxidation and fat utilization, that might be way too much to cause adverse side effects, that they can split it out across the week, still see the receptor activation, still see the total Cmax or the serum dose across the week, but without the spillover into very, global side effects. So they might just have blunted appetite aside from, constipation or nausea or vomiting, all those negative things that you don't want.
And keep in mind that people in the clinical trials that are obese, they have this much blubber to get through, which slows absorption. Whereas if you're single-digit % body fat and you use this as an appetite suppression, we notice with insulin, the leaner you get, the shorter the onset of the insulin is going to be. It's going to act faster. People might go hypo from 2 IU's insulin sub-Q at 6% body fat versus not noticing anything at 12% body fat. So these people in the clinical trials, they're morbidly obese. They're 25%, 30%, 50% body fat. 13 millimeter insulin syringe is just breaking the surface before it gets into systemic circulation. Whereas a guy like you, me, Dean, everybody here in this panel, we are 13 millimeter insulin syringe is almost in systemic circulation because we're lean. So it disperses right away, it goes into the bloodstream. So why would you do 4 milligrams in that scenario versus 4 milligrams where it needs to radiate through all this fat before it gets into your, might take a day or two anyway. So you might need a bolus injection just to get it in. So that's a big difference, right? I think, I'm sure Dean and Niall, you've heard it many times before. You recommend these drugs to people that are a little bit fat. And then after 2 weeks, I don't really get appetite suppression. It's just, you're so fat, it takes forever to get into your bloodstream. No, seriously. Because at the same dose, when they're finally 15% body fat, they get great appetite suppression from the first 2 injections. So there is a difference, man. And they're metabolically fucked, and it takes forever. Like, they probably don't move a lot, so they don't get the circulation of the drug throughout their body. So again, clinical trials, scientific evidence, it's fun, but you have to look at the sample size, the subjects. Right? Are they fat, sedentary, lazy people that can't do daily injections? Do you identify as that sample size? I don't. I'm lean, I'm physically active, I can do daily injections. So I'd rather go with the more frequent injections so I can manage the dose and get less side effects and all the benefit.
You've also got, with Retatrutide, you've got that inverse, we've talked about it before, this inverse effect in bodybuilders that you don't see in the clinical trial data. And whilst it is potentially anecdotal, we've talked before where you actually see a metabolic increase or a shift in metabolism where the appetite suppression is being blunted because of the glucagon peptide creating appetite. So part of you doesn't necessarily want to eat, but the other side of you is going hypoglycemic, that you have to eat to offset the metabolic effect. And sometimes as you get closer to a competition and you're utilizing Retatrutide as your main GLP, it could be working against you if you're using it to control appetite specifically, that you might be better off switching to the earlier generations if it's just for appetite suppression and fat burning and like
and especially with mitochondrial compounds that require more carbohydrates for them to function correctly. You can't physically eat what you need to. And then you literally burn yourself up from the inside out.
You guys can be totally honest with me, but what do you think about this experiment that I did for my mini cut for this last 8 weeks while I was off cycle? I did a milligram of Reta on Thursday and a milligram of Tirzepatide on Monday, just purely as an experiment. One weekly dose, but of each, and that way I had a little bit more of the appetite suppressant.
So when you look at the receptor activation, right, comparatively, I think Retatrutide is reasonably weak on the GLP-1 and the GIP, and then more on the glucagon because the other ones don't activate the glucagon receptor besides Mazdutide and Survodutide. I think they're glucagon and GLP-1 or GIP. I can't remember. I would like to do those drugs. But so since the Retatrutide is spread out, you get less comparative GLP-1 and GIP receptor activation. And if you need more appetite suppression on top of that, it does make sense to combine it with either Tirzepatide or semaglutide, because GLP-1 is predominantly appetite suppression. And then Tirzepatide, you get appetite suppression and axial fat mobilization through the GIP-1 or the GIP receptor. So combining both makes sense. What you could also do is take Retatrutide for long-term appetite suppression and fat liberation through GIP and glucagon receptor agonism, and then take intranasal Xenatide as needed when you feel like cheating on your diet. So those are now also available. You just take a nasal spray of 100 micrograms Xenatide, you block the GIP receptors in the brain and some peripheral tissue, and the appetite is gone for the next 6 hours. Just like people would megadose melanotan to make themselves nauseous, which we should mention also erases hematocrit.
Aren't the efficacies of GLPs through the nasal spray though just not very efficient because of the molecular weight?
Try it.
Okay.
That shit works acutely. It's insane.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like everything else that goes up the nose. Semax, Niall, Salam.
Yeah, you would know, right?
Oxytocin.
Yeah.
Not the others.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah,
for sure.
Oxytocin, that one, yeah. That's
Tanner
like love in
and
a
I are
bottle,
still,
don't take that at the festivals.
Tanner and I are still trying to bring you to a rave.
I'm game, man. I'm game. I won't be walking much. Need crutches.
Frankie Connolly asks, best hair loss stack while running DHT derivatives and most hair safe steroids aside from natural and only cycles.
Dean,
thanks guys.
I'm sitting this one out.
What's up? Sorry.
Best hair loss stack while running DHT derivatives and most hair safe steroids aside from natural only cycles.
Oh, I don't think, well, there might be, if you're like looking at how can we offset the most hair safe, the most obvious then is just doing tests with finasteride, and then you've got none to worry about. I think, to be honest, they're just like before with like these sort of safer cycles or safer use, whatever. I don't think personally there's any like hair safe. That if you have the genetics and there's underlying issues towards oxidative stress and it's going to cause the hair follicle to miniaturize and die, maybe after you've had a hair transplant, there might be more hair safe cycles, but you're still going to see maybe oxidative stress at the hair follicle that could cause your hair to fall out as well anyway. Mm-hmm. I think this whole argument of like this cycle, yeah, you can take finasteride, no problem, and that offsets local DHT production. But the root cause mechanisms of hair loss, and every time I talk about this, people just go off on a big long tangent about, I took finasteride and my hair has been fine. Well, that's great, but there's other things that play into hair loss, like estradiol, too high or too low, generally too low, and you restrict blood flow to the scalp. Thyroid, too much thyroid hormone, hyperthyroidism, your hair starts falling out. You have oxidative stress or DNA damage, whether it's from the sun or whatever, locally on the skin, whatever way you want to view it, bacteria, acne, folliculitis. All these things can play into hair loss. That's not just blocking DHT will save your hair. So I think
brain draft and neurotropic factor. There's also a link there with hair loss.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like increases in BDNF?
Yeah, BDNF increases can also cause hair loss.
So
is that why all the smartest people are bald?
Yeah, allegedly.
So I think
I
you know,
my hair still. I just pretend to be bald, so I can pretend to be smart.
I think could you do like like this is sort of where like could you take a massive like steroid cycle and keep your hair? I don't think so. You can do some strategies with minoxidil, finasteride and all that, but there's other strategies then like the low estrogen, the hyperthyroidism, the nutrient deficiencies, oxidative stress, DNA damage, blah, 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 whatever you go down that rabbit hole, that just focusing on blocking DHT and using minoxidil to improve blood flow delivery will probably keep some of your hair, but I don't think over time you're going to keep your full density. You're still going to see shedding occur as time goes on and miniaturization, just not to the same extent as if you've done nothing. And that's sort of where then, if the genetics are there for androgenic alopecia or receding hairline, once that recession has been offset with, I guess, androgen resistant follicles from the back of your head, that in theory shouldn't have any local DHT inflammatory response, then you might be able to get away with a cycle. But you still have to then consider that there's still hair on your scalp, the back of your crown, the top of your head, that is going to be susceptible to low estrogen or thyroid hormone. So you're still, even with a hair transplant, you can still have your hair fall out. The hair that's been transplanted, you might be left with tufts on the side that are still there, but the rest of your hair falls out. And that's why, and you're probably told the same yourself with the procedure, that after the procedure, you're using finasteride and minoxidil to protect the existing hair than protect the transplanted hair. That they tell you that if you don't protect the existing hair, you'll need another transplant to fill in the gaps of the hair that's fallen out from the androgen resistant hairline. Yeah. So finasteride, minoxidil and all these sort of strategies, maybe, if you sort of follow the lines of what me and Steve have talked about, that like 20 milligrams of Tren per week with TRT, small bit of Anavar with finasteride, maybe, but you still have oxidative stress to think about. You still have all like the low estradiol. Is 20 milligrams of Tren on top of TRT going to generate massive changes in muscle protein synthesis genomically or everything else? I don't really see it, to be honest.
But if you have a little bit of muscle and a little bit of hair, you're better in the dating market, Dean.
Well,
so
that's
you can find a nice middle ground. So as long as you're getting laid from the little extra muscle that you have and the hair that you preserve, I think it's okay. I think one thing that people need to realize is that hair-safe cycles are not brain-safe. Nandrolone only is not good for your brain. Test in finasteride through the reduction of allopregnanolone, I don't think it's good for your brain. And it depends on how much finasteride you're taking. Right? Some people hammer 1 milligram per day, and their allopregnanolone levels are in the tank. So you can preserve your hair, but your libido and your brain health is going to go along with it. So you're going to have to sacrifice something.
And that's
I'd rather sacrifice my hair, honestly.
Yeah, I think with like finasteride, again, it comes down to like what we talked about with patient compliance. If you look at a half-life of finasteride, it could in theory, like, okay, it's an 8 to 10 hour half-life. You could in theory dose that maybe once every 3 or 4 days rather than every single day. And again, you think about telling someone, I want you to take X dose of finasteride on Monday, and then don't take the next dose until Friday, and then don't take the next dose until the following Wednesday. Eventually the person is like, oh shit, I fucking forgot how I'm supposed to take the drug. rather than tell them, okay, here's 1 milligram every day. Take it when you wake up in the morning, forget about it. So there is probably better ways, like even with topical finasteride, topical minoxidil. Do you have to apply it every day or twice per day? Could you get away with every second or third day? You have to think about, again, the compliance and the how the drug is working. And that's sort of, again, where perhaps when people get post-finasteride syndrome or those effects to their brain, you've followed a standard prescription of like 0.5 milligram or 1 milligram every day for 5 or 6 weeks, and all of a sudden your libido is shot, your mitochondrial efficiency, or the inner workings of the inner mitochondrial membrane or the electron transport chain has changed from NADPH, and everything we've talked about, like biochemistry wise, changing because of that drug's effect on DHT. And then NADPH depletion has an effect onto aromatase, and now you're not making enough estrogen, and now you've got a dopamine to serotonin imbalance.
Yeah.
It's
a cascade of misery.
It's guys want everything, you want to have your hairline, you have big muscles and whatever else, but the strategies of having to play into each thing, that's sort of where, like, for me anyway, with the transplant, planning that in for when I was finished, retired, said and done, stepping away, you then know, okay, there's nothing that's going to interfere with the hair afterwards. Whereas, doing the transplant and then having to worry about, okay, is this transplant going to stick because I'm doing X, Y, and Z strategies? The transplanted hair, no doubt, will stick. But the other hair, the existing hairline on top of it, the crown especially, starts to thin. And then you're going into territories with crown transplants, which are 50-50 hit or miss, depending on the technique of the direct hair implantation, not killing the existing follicles. So now you've lost the donor follicle and you've lost the local natural follicle itself. And then that could leave you even more bald, that your transplant attempt just results in you shaving your head.
Which again is not the end of the world. Yeah. I still got it.
I said it before, the shaved head, I enjoyed the shaved head. There's so
I did too.
So little maintenance to shaved heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it rains, you can really
Feels right.
feel it on your scalp. It's great. It's a good sensation. Yeah, I think. Guys, I got to bounce. It's getting late.
All right. Thanks for coming on, bro. Thank you, guys.
Of course. Anytime.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do a new podcast when I'm in Vegas.
That would
6
be
weeks
awesome.
out.
Yeah. Maybe someday in the far future, if you guys would all be down to come on again, because there's so much that we didn't get to talk about. Plus, I feel bad that we didn't get to attack 99 of the 100 Q&As.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry.
No worries. I'll see you soon. Take it easy.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Peace.
Ciao.
Love you guys. Man, there was so much that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to go over the sweet spot for PEDs. I wanted to go over their new perception of GH dosing protocols and timing, if that has changed a little bit over the course of the last year to 2 years or so. I also wanted to go over a little bit more on full body optimization and disease prevention, especially since, as you guys know, with these guys' knowledge, there's a lot of potential things that could happen, but luckily that's based off your genetics. So luckily it's not going to happen to everybody. Most of it isn't going to happen to everybody, but I want to thank you guys for inputting your Q&As. I will do my best to get them all on the podcast again, so that way we can attack the Q&As and we can attack a little bit more of the more applicable content that I wanted to attack. And just want to thank you guys for coming on the podcast again. So only way I make a living is APR Health Solutions and Optimize HP, the HRT clinic I'm with, and just the clothing company Young Elaine Huge. So it's code now for all of that, and it's the reason I can continue to do this podcast. So if you guys ever need anything, I am always checking my DM requests. If you have any questions for any reason, or you're just curious or just need to talk, just shoot me a DM on Instagram, Niall Niga. Sometimes I check the Trensparent podcast page, but Normally I forget. I always check the Mount Liga page. So that's about it. Peace, guys.